The Radiant Saint Masters in the surroundings could not help but gather around together, forming a huge circle around Jian Chen. They all stared at him as he continued to comprehend the diagram while under the steel's protection. At that moment, Jian Chen had become the center of attention. Originally, Jian Chen did stand out at all with his two-colored soul core in this crowd of radiant god kings. In fact, he did not receive any attention at all. He was someone insignificant who could have been forgotten accidentally. But now, everyone focused on him. Who is this person? He only has a two-colored soul core, yet he hasn't been pushed out by the power of the steel. Is his talent greater than all of ours? That's impossible. Chong Yang was only tested to be a one-star genius. How could he exceed us? There are many 9-star geniuses among us here, but we've all been pushed out by the power of the steel. Only Chong Yang remains in a state of cultivation. Is Chong Yang's talent really greater than all of ours? Are you saying that Chong Yang has surpassed 9-star geniuses? This. The Radiant Saint Masters discussed with one another. Many of their gazes towards Jian Chen flickered. Donglin Yanxue stood beside Donglin Qiuxue as she looked at the determined Jian Chen with mixed feelings. Within the Radiant Saint Hall, she was the only person who knew about Jian Chen's true talent. As a result, she had always believed that Jian Chen possessed the most right in obtaining the legacy. As a result, she was the only unsurprised person present after witnessing this. As a matter of fact, she believed that this was supposed to be. I sure have underestimated Chong Yang, Donglin Qiuxue also sighed in amazement. How can he obtain a Grand Exalt's legacy so easily? Sure, he's still comprehending the diagram, but that doesn't mean he'll definitely get the legacy, barked a Radiant God King enviously from within the crowd. However, just when he finished speaking, the protective power vanished silently. At that moment, Jian Chen became just like everyone else. He had lost the protection of the steel. Many of the Radiant God Kings present let out sighs of relief when they saw that. Naturally, they believed that Jian Chen was the same as him. They thought he had failed and been forced out by the power of the steel. However, before they could celebrate, a heavy primordial presence filled with age suddenly appeared and enveloped the surroundings. The hearts of all the Radiant God Kings shuddered under the influence of this primordial presence. They all looked over with narrowed eyes. A dazzling ball of light suddenly flew out from beneath the steel. It was only the size of a fist, but it possessed the presence of the laws of the world. It shone with dazzling light, illuminating the entire place. It's the Grand Exalt's legacy. Heavens, it's actually the Grand Exalt's legacy imprint. It went without saying that all the hallowed Saint Master gathered here knew what the ball of light was. However, the power of laws were just too dense. As soon as it appeared, it interfered with the laws in the surroundings, affecting the order there. The various phenomena clearly demonstrated that this was the Grand Exalt's legacy imprint. Immediately, everyone's eyes turned bloodshot as their hearts thumped heavily. Immediately, some of the hallowed Saint Masters were overcome by their greed, and they flew towards the Grand Exalt's legacy as quickly as they could. Grand Exalts were the undisputed sovereigns of the world. They were the most powerful existences, so their legacies were naturally the most powerful and most terrifying. It was a fortune enough to change a person's fate. No one could resist its temptation. At this moment, no one paid attention to Jian Chen anymore, nor did anyone consider why the Grand Exalt's legacy imprint had appeared. The only thought that remained in their heads was to obtain it regardless of the price. However, just when they charged towards the imprint without any regard, it turned into a streak of light and arrived before Jian Chen like the distance between them never even existed in the first place. It hovered there silently with dazzling light. Jian Chen's eyes opened slowly at that moment as well. He stood up steadily and glanced at the crazed hallowed Saint Master indifferently. He grabbed the imprint casually. The Grand Exalt's legacy was actually an imprint of consciousness. It contained information left behind by the previous master of the Tower of Radiance. As Jian Chen grasped the imprint, he could clearly feel that a tremendous amount of information was stored within it. However, when all the hallowed Saint Masters saw Jian Chen grab the imprint with such ease, they were taken aback. However, they all bellowed out soon afterwards. Hand over the Grand Exalt's legacy imprint. The Grand Exalt's legacy imprint isn't something you can possess. Hand it over. Chong Yang, give me what's in your hand. I'll give you my space ring in exchange. It contains all the wealth I've managed to accumulate in the past 300,000 years. All the Radiant God Kings charged towards Jian Chen in a crazed manner. They directly targeted the legacy imprint in Jian Chen's hand. Many of them even condensed radiant swords, swinging them towards Jian Chen's arm. They surged with killing intent. Some people even formed seals with both hands, condensing huge hands out of radiant saint force that fell on Jian Chen. They wanted to take Jian Chen away. This was a Grand Exalt's legacy. Obtaining it would mean rising up. The temptation was far too great. All these Radiant God Kings had forgotten about how it was forbidden to kill other disciples within the Radiant Saint Hall as a result. At this moment, laws of the Hallowed even more powerful than what most Radiant God Kings possessed suddenly appeared, condensing into a huge hand. It swung towards over a dozen of the Radiant God Kings that charged towards Jian Chen before reaching towards Jian Chen with even greater speed. The hand belonged to the Lord of the Sky-Gazing Peak, one of the 99 main peaks. Before the Grand Exalt's legacy, he also struggled to resist the temptation. He began to take part in the action. Chong Yang, give the Grand Exalt's legacy imprint to me. I'll keep you safe. Donglin Xueqi struck out as well. She was also the lord of one of the 99 main peaks. She kept the lord of the Sky-Gazing Peak busy as she rapidly approached Jian Chen. Humph. The Grand Exalt's legacy imprint is mine. A cold snort rang out. A young man who seemed to be in his 20s appeared behind Jian Chen silently. He had already reached out with lightning speed, arriving near Jian Chen in a single instance. The young man was extremely powerful as well. He was also a lord of one of the 99 main peaks, the lord of the Scorching Sun Peak. His individual strength was no less than Donglin Xueqi or the lord of the Sky-Gazing Peak. Chapter 2343. Overwhelming an entire group, 1. They were not the only one who tried to lay their hands on Jian Chen. All the hallowed saint masters gathered there actually flew towards Jian Chen with lightning speed. Every single one of them had become crazed. They seized every single second available to them as if whoever got to Jian Chen first would obtain the Grand Exalt's legacy. After all, there were many Radiant God Kings gathered here. There were even the lords of the 99 main peaks who had remained as mid-Radiant God Kings for far too long. With Jian Chen's two-colored soul core, none of them took him seriously. From their perspective, he was just waiting for people to divide him up as they wished. However, despite being surrounded by so many Radiant God Kings, Jian Chen clenched the imprint and remained completely composed. Even though he was completely surrounded, and there were many Radiant God Kings no weaker than the Lord of the Sky-Gazing Peak, he felt no fear at all. At this moment, the Lord of the Scorching Sun Peak's large powerful hand had arrived 3 inches away from Jian Chen's shoulder. A few other powerful hallowed saint masters were just as close to Jian Chen. They were about to grab the imprint in Jian Chen's hand. Moreover, over a dozen radiant swords that shone with dazzling lights were about to land on Jian Chen's arm with the power of the laws of the hallowed. There were even several large hands condensed from radiant saint force that were sinking down with great force. These attacks that came in from everywhere had already formed a jail. It sealed off all of Jian Chen's paths of retreat, locking him in completely. Anyone who saw this would definitely think he was doomed. It was impossible for him to escape. Chong Yang! Donglin Yenshue's cries rang out in the distance. She could not help but pale in fright when she saw that Jian Chen was in danger. Quick! Save Chong Yang. Don't let him suffer any harm at all. Donglin Yenshue immediately ordered the 8 retainers beside her. The 8 retainers did not hesitate at all. Before Donglin Yenshue had even finished talking, they flew over in a hurry. However, desire burned in their eyes as well. They looked at Jian Chen with greed. Clearly, the 8 retainers had no intention of helping Jian Chen. They too could not resist the temptation of the Grand Exalt's legacy imprint. They joined in on the fight. Jian Chen could not help but sneer when he saw so many people fight for the Grand Exalt's legacy in his hand. With a single movement, space pulsed, and he vanished from the encirclement. At such a crucial time, he used the laws of space. He basically teleported away from everyone's attacks, appearing outside the encirclement. Boom! All the attacks from the Radiant God Kings missed. Countless attacks landed on the ground, producing a deafening boom and kicking up dust into the air. Several radiant swords shot towards the opposing ground, forcing back many weaker Radiant God Kings. It was an utter mess. Since I've already obtained the Grand Exalt's legacy, it means that I'm fated to have it. If you try to take it forcefully, you're disobeying the will of the Grand Exalt, Jian Chen called out coldly from nearby as he held the imprint. He could not put the legacy into his space ring, and he did not have the time to absorb the information within it either. As a result, he could only hold it in his hand. However, when everyone looked at the dazzling imprint that was accompanied by the power of laws, their desires were only aggravated. They lost all rationality and went crazy. Chong Yang, that's not something you should obtain. Hand it over. You only have a two-colored soul core, yet you dare to say you're fated to possess the Grand Exalt's legacy imprint? You really are shameless. Hand over the legacy or die. The presences of all the radiant God Kings surged as they continued to charge towards Jian Chen aggressively. For the sake of the legacy, for the sake of an opportunity to rise up, all of them became crazed. They would even go as far as killing for it. All of them had basically lost their minds. As a result, they failed to realize just how Jian Chen had managed to break out from their encirclement earlier. With a flash, Jian Chen avoided their attacks effortlessly. As he saw the raging desire within everyone's eyes, his gaze gradually turned cold. At this moment, powerful laws of the hallowed descended. Donglin Xueqi had struck out once again from behind Jian Chen, condensing a radiant sword and swinging it towards Jian Chen's hand without any hesitation at all. Auntie, don't! Donglin Xueqi immediately grabbed Donglin Xueqi's hand as she pleaded with a terrified face. Move! Donglin Xueqi called out as her eyes burned with desire. She suddenly shook her arm, and with her cultivation as a mid-god king, she shook off Donglin Xueqi easily. Then she attacked Jian Chen mercilessly. At this moment, no one could remember the rules of the Radiant Saint Hall, nor could they remember Vice Leader Xianzhan who stood behind Jian Chen. Obtaining the legacy had become the only goal for everyone present. Donglin Xueqi was filled with worry when she saw how Jian Chen was surrounded. Only she did not care about the Grand Exalt's legacy out of everyone present. She only felt worried about Jian Chen. Suddenly, determination flooded Donglin Xueqi's eyes. She took out an ancient glyph from her space ring. After activating it, a powerful pulse of energy appeared, which turned into a barrier of energy around her. Afterwards, she arrived before Jian Chen under the protection of the barrier and pulled Jian Chen in. She used the power of the talisman to block all the incoming attacks. Chong Yang, let's go. I can't last for very long, Donglin Xueqi called out in worry before fleeing into the distance without even asking for Jian Chen's response. However, she became stunned very soon, and her expression turned horrendous. The gate out of the miniature world had already closed. They could not leave. No matter how they fled, they would remain trapped in the miniature world. They would not be able to escape from the radiant God Kings. Booms constantly rang out outside the energy barrier. Powerful pulses of energy wreaked havoc in the miniature world as the radiant God Kings struck out while bellowing out crazily, attacking the barrier of energy. They reduced this picturesque miniature world to a waste. The talisman had been bestowed upon Donglin Xueqi after she became the chosen saint. It had impressive power, enough to block attacks from primordial realm experts. But the power within the talisman deleted rapidly under the continuous attacks from all these radiant God Kings. It could not last for very long. Donglin Xueqi, you shouldn't have helped me. Jian Chen remained calm within the barrier, except his gaze towards Donglin Xueqi bore a sliver of helplessness. I don't care. I just can't let anything happen to you, Donglin Xueqi said stubbornly. From when Jian Chen obtained the legacy to when he became encircled, it had all happened too quickly, so quickly that many people were unable to react. As a result, Donglin Xueqi failed to take notice of how Jian Chen had managed to avoid all the attacks. Subconsciously, she still believed that Jian Chen only had a two-colored soul core and had yet to mature into a prodigy of impressive strength. Chapter 2344, Overwhelming an Entire Group, 2. We're people on separate paths in life, Jian Chen sighed secretly. Donglin Xueqi remained silent. She gritted her teeth as she paid close attention to the situation outside. Suddenly, a powerful pressure appeared. A meter-long sword shot out, stabbing the barrier heavily with chilling killing intent. Boom! The energy barrier immediately shook. The might of the attack was simply too terrifying. The power of the talisman was rapidly depleted after taking this strike. God artifact. It's actually a god artifact. Many radiant god kings cried out after the god artifact appeared. Unsurprisingly, the sword was a low-quality god artifact. Low-quality god artifacts were precious, and even many primordial realm experts did not possess them. However, Many of these radiant god kings had either great status or origins, or they had their own fortuitous encounters in the past. As a result, a few of them possessed god artifacts. Once the first god artifact appeared, a second, third, and fourth appeared as well. They all gave off soaring power, striking the barrier with chilling killing intent. These god artifacts had extraordinary power. Even though the radiant god kings were nowhere close to unleashing their complete power, they were still a force to be reckoned with. The barrier shook even more when it faced the attacks of several god artifacts, and the talisman rapidly dimmed as well. A crack seemed to have appeared. At this moment, a few more people drew their god artifacts. A total of 10 god artifacts of varying shapes and sizes struck the barrier with enough power to shake up the world. Donglin Yanxue immediately paled. The talisman's effective time became even shorter before all these god artifacts. There was nothing she could do about it. However, Jian Chen remained composed beside her. He looked at Donglin Yanxue with mixed feelings and said, "Actually, if you pay close attention, you will realize these people can't harm me at all. Even if they all work together, even if they wield god artifacts, they still pose no threat to me because they are far too weak in my eyes. I told you before. We are people on separate paths in life, but you still fail to understand the meaning behind it. You should be able to understand it completely now," Jian Chen said slowly. At the same time, the barrier from Donglin Yanxue's talisman finally shattered from the consecutive attacks of 10 god artifacts. The great power turned into a terrifying storm that surged out with devastating power. Even radiant god kings with 7-colored soul cores would have to avoid such a powerful storm of energy, let alone Donglin Yanxue with her 5-colored soul core. The storm of energy created from a total of 10 god artifacts was extremely terrifying. It was enough to cause all the radiant god kings to pale in fright. After the storm of energy had swept out, the 10 god artifacts whistled over once more directly towards Jian Chen and Donglin Yanxue. They showed no mercy at all. The people in control of the 10 god artifacts were crazed. They would even go as far as killing the chosen saint for the Grand Exalt's legacy. They could truly do anything under the temptation of the Grand Exalt's legacy. They would even be willing to kill people even more important than the chosen saint. Humph! Jian Chen snorted coldly when he saw this. Iciness immediately filled his eyes. Originally, he did not want to harm these radiant god kings. After all, he had remained in the Radiant Saint Hall for such a long time. He did not want to go too overboard. However, now that the people in control of the god artifacts did not even want to spare Donglin Yanxue, he had been truly angered. He took a step forward, blocking Donglin Yanxue with his slender body. He allowed the shocking energy to strike his body while he stood as still as a mountain. In that instance, Jian Chen's rather tiny body felt as imposing as a mountain, seemingly immovable. At the same time, he gave off a shocking presence. Turbulent energy circulated within him. He was like a volcano that was about to erupt. At this moment, he no longer hid. He exposed his edge. A strand of dazzling sword chi shot out from the tip of Jian Chen's finger. It gave off a surging presence, and with a single flash, the sword chi turned into a sword and collided with 6 god artifacts. Clang! The sword chi collided with the god artifacts and produced a clear screech. The 6 god artifacts that possessed enough power to strike fear in the hearts of all the radiant god kings was like a child's plaything before Jian Chen's sword chi. They were knocked far away, striking the ground heavily and causing the ground to tremble. Afterwards, the sword chi broke free from Jian Chen's hand, shooting off as a streak of light that collided with one of the god artifacts in the air loudly. The 7th god artifact produced a miserable thrum and vanished into the horizon. Who knows where it had been knocked away to? In the end, Jian Chen condensed the laws of strength and threw out 3 consecutive punches. The power was terrifying and shocking, making space tremble. He struck the 3 last god artifacts in the most violent fashion possible. Bang! 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 With the 3 deafening sounds, the last 3 god artifacts dimmed from Jian Chen's punches. They all produced miserable thrums as if the artifact spirits were wailing out. The 3 god artifacts were knocked far away, vanishing in the blink of an eye. The expressions of the 3 radiant god kings who wielded these god artifacts changed drastically. Blood sprayed from their mouths as they all paled. Shock filled their eyes. The 3 of them possessed a mental connection with their god artifacts, and the god artifacts had received a violent blow from Jian Chen. The power was far too terrifying and shocking that the 3 of them could not avoid being affected as well. They were heavily injured as a result. The storm had not subsided just yet. After the 3 low-quality god artifacts were blown away, various radiant god kings used a number of radiant arts to send a white barrage of attacks towards Jian Chen. Jian Chen's gaze was cold. He stood in front of Donglin Yanxue as he faced the barrage alone. With a wave of his hand, sharp sword qi permeated the surroundings and shot out as a white screen. The screen obliterated all and was unstoppable. It turned all the attacks from the radiant god kings to pieces. In a single instance, the threat from the 10 god artifacts and the attacks of the various radiant god kings had been cleanly resolved by Jian Chen. All the radiant god kings, including the ones who wielded god artifacts, had failed to even touch Jian Chen. In the blink of an eye, the miniature world quietened down. Everyone in the miniature world stared at Jian Chen blankly like he was a ghost. None of them launched any more attacks. Donglin Yanshue's eyes widened as well. She stared at Jian Chen in shock and disbelief as her mind blanked out. The basically invincible strength that Jian Chen displayed left Donglin Xueqi, the Lord of the Sky-Gazing Peak, and the other lords of the 99 Main Peak speechless. They all stared at him at a loss as they were filled with shock. They struggled to believe what had just happened. "Why, you're a part of the martial soul lineage." Suddenly, a cry rang out from the crowd. As soon as those words rang out, the faces of everyone changed drastically. Afterwards, their gazes towards Jian Chen became filled with intense surprise and hatred. Some of them even staggered backwards uncontrollably. They immediately paled, and their eyes became filled with fear. The martial soul lineage was piercing to everyone's ears, as not only were they composed of an extremely small group of different Radiant Saint Masters, but they also had deep grievances with the Radiant Saint Hall. This grievance was so deep that they could no longer reconcile with each other. It had already reached the point where they would be at each other's throats at every encounter. Moreover, Qing Shan of the martial soul lineage had intruded on the world of Moon and Star during the first trial for the selection of the chosen saint. He hunted down everyone there in a devastating manner. Not only did he claim Elder He Tian's life, but many other protectors had died to his hands as well. It was a heavy loss for the Radiant Saint Hall. As a result, all the Radiant Saint Masters felt very deep fear towards the people of the martial soul lineage along with their hatred. The martial soul lineage had a total of 7 people, but every single one of them was extremely powerful. Not only were they invincible among the same level of cultivation with their martial soul force, but they could also challenge or even kill those at higher cultivation levels. It was extremely terrifying. Not only was Jian Chen a Radiant Saint Master with a 2-colored soul core, but he had also exposed his great strength as a fighter right now. He was both a Radiant Saint Master and a fighter. If he did not possess martial soul force, what did he possess? As a result, as soon as Jian Chen exposed his identity as part of the martial soul lineage, he immediately scared away the Radiant Saint Masters who feared the martial soul lineage. Qing Shan. He's Qing Shan. We've all been tricked. Chongyang is only his disguise. His true identity is actually Qing Shan of the martial soul lineage. At this moment, another terrified cry rang out. These words shocked everyone. Even the eyes of Donglin Yanxue widened as she stared at Jian Chen's back in disbelief. What? Chongyang is actually Qing Shan in disguise? How is this possible? The Lord of the Sky-Gazing Peak and Donglin Xueqi were stunned as well. The martial soul lineage only has 7 people, and Qing Shan is the only one at God King among the 7 of them. The rest of them have all reached the primordial realm. Chongyang's strength completely matches Qing Shan's, so who else can he be? Said Radiant God King coldly. A god artifact hovered above his head, shining with light as it gave off a great pressure. He was very powerful. After learning Jian Chen's identity, not only did he feel no fear, but he even surged with battle intent instead. No, Chongyang is not Qing Shan. I saw the real Qing Shan in the world of Moon and Star. Chongyang and Qing Shan are clearly 2 different people, Donglin Yanxue explained for Jian Chen loudly. However, the Radiant God King with the God artifact snorted coldly in response. You've been tricked. Maybe when you saw Chongyang and Qing Shan, it was only Qing Shan's original body and a clone. With Qing Shan's strength, you obviously won't be able to see through his tricks if he got a clone to fool you. Moreover, the place where the trial was held was so obscure. Even among our Radiant Saint Hall, barely anyone knew about it. How did Qing Shan locate the world of Moon and Star with such precision as an outsider? But it all makes sense now. He was clearly working with a clone of his. That was how he found the world of moon and star accurately. The Radiant God King argued and gained the secret agreement of many Radiant God Kings nearby. Even some people who had doubts about Jian Chen's identity gradually believed that he was Qing Shan. That makes sense. So many Radiant God Kings died in the trial last time. Only a single chosen saint was left alive. Donglin Yanxue and Chong Yang were actually able to return alive despite such weak cultivations. That's already suspicious. Now that you look at it, it's clearly a show that Chong Yang put on. He's Qing Shan, someone else said loudly. None of the people present had considered the possibility of Jian Chen being the 8th person to possess martial soul force. After all, far too few people belong to the martial soul lineage. Impossible. Donglin Yanxue struggled to accept this. As if she had been struck by something, she rapidly retreated while shaking her head in dejection. She pulled away from Jian Chen. It doesn't matter whether I'm Qing Shan or not. What is important is that I hold no ill intentions towards any of you, or you wouldn't still be standing around right now. I've only come for the Grand Exalt's legacy imprint, Jian Chen said at this moment. He was very indifferent, but his words were believable. He did not try to explain his identity. After all, there was no doubt about his possession of martial soul force. As long as he possessed martial soul force, he belonged to the martial soul lineage, and the martial soul lineage had always opposed the Radiant Saint Hall. As a result, he had no need to continue explaining. No matter what he said, he would remain as the greatest enemy in the eyes of these Radiant Saint Masters. He was a target that they had to kill. The Grand Exalt's legacy imprint is the greatest fortune of our Radiant Saint Hall. We can't let it end up in the hands of the martial soul lineage no matter what. Once the martial soul lineage obtains the Grand Exalt's legacy, the outcome will be unthinkable. Everyone attack together and kill Chong Yang. This is directly related to the survival of our Radiant Saint Hall. We can't be selfish. Everyone stand together and take back the Grand Exalt's legacy imprint. That's right. Our Radiant Saint Hall faces the greatest threat yet. We must stand together. We can let anyone take the Grand Exalt's legacy, but we can't let the martial soul lineage take it, or we're doomed. Righteous and encouraging calls rang out from the crowd. The unyielding spirit to stand and fight within the Radiant Saint Masters seemed to be awakened. They all overcame their fears and radiated with battle intent. They charged towards Jian Chen without any fear of death. In the distance, the god artifacts that Jian Chen had knocked away returned. The 10 god artifacts united once again, hurling towards Jian Chen with soaring power. A member of the martial soul lineage has snuck into the most sacred place of our Radiant Saint Hall, the Tower of Radiance. If we don't kill this person, we'll never be able to redeem ourselves from the humiliation. No one hold back. Unleash your full strength. With that, a few more presences that belonged to god artifacts appeared among the group. Another 6 people drew their god artifacts, sending them towards Jian Chen aggressively. Donglin Xueqi happened to be one of those people. Her god artifact was a faint blue sword. The sword had been bestowed upon her by a senior within the Donglin clan. The attack this time was even more violent than the last. People before were only contending for the Grand Exalt's legacy, so they did hold back slightly. But now, they used all their strength to kill. They were merciless. As a result, the attacks this time were several times greater than before. The 16 low-quality god artifact cut open a path as streaks of light. Terrifying energy shook up the surroundings as the killing intent became almost tangible. It all targeted Jian Chen. Behind the 16 god artifacts were the radiant arts from the various radiant god kings. The attacks came in all kinds of shapes and sizes, merging together into a wall of white that engulfed Jian Chen. Moreover, many radiant god kings had fallen into a formation, powering it together. They launched attacks towards Jian Chen that were far more powerful than anything they could unleash alone. At this moment, Jian Chen was truly surrounded. He faced attacks from all sides. Alone, he faced the most violent attacks from all the radiant god kings. Moreover, they were hallowed saint masters. They had comprehended the laws of the hallowed, making their battle prowess even greater than fighters at the same level. Chapter 2346. The Grand Exalt's Descendant, 1. Jian Chen remained calm as he faced this barrage of attacks. He stood there leisurely, without losing his composure at all. A resplendent light surged from his body as light gathered in from the surroundings. It was from the power of the laws of the sword. It engulfed Jian Chen, causing him to seemingly become a sword in that moment. Afterwards, he used his body as a sword and went to receive the incoming god artifacts. Sword chi pierced through the air as all the light in the world seemed to darken, replaced by the light from Jian Chen. He seemed like the only existence there. Boom! With a deafening sound, Jian Chen collided with the god artifacts while surrounded by light. Immediately, several dimming god artifacts were blasted away. Jian Chen hovered in the air above everyone. The light around him did not dim at all. Instead, it shone with even greater splendor. He seemed invincible. The other god artifacts could not help but separate and attack Jian Chen from all directions after witnessing how powerful he was. Jian Chen's eyes were cold. The laws of the sword condensed, gathering into a strand of sword chi on his fingertip. He stabbed out 9 times in a single instance as the sword chi shone with blinding light. Every single strike had astonishing might as if possessing endless power. Every single strike moved with lightning speed, leaving behind blurs. He stabbed out 9 times in a single instance, striking the last 9 god artifacts that came flying in from all directions with perfect precision. He was so fast that no one present managed to react to it. This was because even the experts like the lords of the 99 main peaks were unable to see Jian Chen stab out even with the senses of their souls. Boom! 9 booms seemed to merge into one. Jian Chen had blown away the remaining god artifacts. They dimmed. Afterwards, Jian Chen jolted, and the light that had condensed around him suddenly shattered. It turned into a myriad of soybean-sized specks that hovered around him. Jian Chen extended his finger, and the specks of light immediately shot off. Like a meteor shower, they rapidly approached the attacks from the Radiant Saint Masters with sharp sword chi. Immediately, the wall of radiant swords and other radiant arts condensed from the laws of the hallowed seemed to be a piece of paper before Jian Chen's barrage. They were all ripped to pieces, unable to approach him at all. Within the entire world, there is none unvanquished. Energy suppressing formation. Suppress. At the same time, over a dozen radiant god kings worked together to create a formation. It radiated with powerful energy as it fell towards Jian Chen. Jian Chen hovered in the air, allowing the violent storm of energy to batter his body. It made his hair flutter and his clothes ruffle. He seemed invincible. He swung his right hand, and a strand of sword chi several meters in length shot through the air, striking the formation. Boom! Immediately, the formation shattered, and the radiant god kings who supported it suffered an intense backlash. Blood sprayed from their mouths as they paled. Afterwards, a few more strands of sword chi shot through the air, shattering the few other formations. In a single instance, Jian Chen had destroyed the combined attacks of all the radiant god kings effortlessly. He was just too powerful right now, so powerful that he could kill a few regular primordial realm experts. On the other hand, the most powerful ones here were only mid-radiant god kings. The disparity in strength was just too great. Even when they all worked together with over a dozen god artifacts, they were unable to make up for this huge difference. So powerful. Chongyang is far too powerful. Even the god artifacts can't deal with him. How are we supposed to defeat him? God damn it. He still has the Grand Exalt's legacy imprint. Are we just supposed to watch someone from the martial soul lineage take away the greatest treasure of our Radiant Saint Hall and do nothing? Many Radiant God Kings became dumbfounded with that. Jian Chen's strength had exceeded all of their imaginations. Despite the gathering of so many Radiant God Kings and over a dozen god artifacts, they had failed to even touch him. How were they supposed to fight him like that? How were they supposed to take back the Grand Exalt's legacy imprint? Stop wasting your efforts. You're not my opponent, said Jian Chen from high in the air. Although his voice was calm, the terrifying presence he gave off weighed on the hearts of everyone present. Although you have over a dozen god artifacts, you're all far too weak. You can't unleash the power of the god artifacts at all, so you pose no threat to me. Harming me will be very difficult. All the radiant god kings fell silent from that. The faces of all the lords of the main peaks with the god artifacts sank and became ugly. Donglin Xueqi and the lord of the sky-gazing peak experienced mixed feelings. They had never thought that the Chongyang they had once interacted with would possess such terrifying battle prowess. It made them feel powerless. Donglin Yanxue stood in the distance as she stared at the invincible Jian Chen blankly. She too experienced very mixed feelings. It's far too early to jump to conclusions. The Lord of the Scorching Sun Peak snorted coldly. He stared at Jian Chen with killing intent while his presence rose. It surpassed the level of mid-god king very soon. The Lord of the Scorching Sun Peak is actually breaking through. Gong Sunji is far too reckless. The mist within the Tower of Radiance hasn't dispersed entirely. He can't hide here forever. Isn't he afraid of that great demon? Cries immediately rang out in the surroundings. Unsurprisingly, the Lord of the Scorching Sun Peak, Gong Sunji, had chosen to break through to late God King at a time like this. Originally, there needed to be a period of time before mid-god kings could break through to late God King. However, the lords of the 99 peaks had all kept their cultivation suppressed for tens of thousands of years or even longer. They had already reached the limits of their cultivation level. Breaking through only required a single thought. That was the exact reason why Gong Sunji completed his breakthrough in a matter of seconds. He was completely unobstructed. Gong Sunji's strength immediately increased several times over with his breakthrough. Even if you become late god kings, you're still not my opponent. Jian Chen glanced past them indifferently. Humph, what bold words. No matter how powerful you are, you're still a god king. I'm at the same level of cultivation as you now, said the Lord of the Scorching Sun Peak as he snorted coldly. He formed a seal with both hands and used a secret technique. White flames suddenly sprang up and roared on his body. As the flames burned, Gong Sunji's presence immediately began to rise once again. It rose even faster than when he broke through. However, he became paler and paler. He became haggard as his life force became weaker and weaker. Clearly, he had used a forbidden technique. He had paid a huge price in exchange for strength beyond what he was supposed to possess. Jian Chen also frowned slightly at this moment. He did not look at Gong Sunji. Instead, he looked at the Grand Exalt's legacy imprint in his hand. The imprint had suddenly become scorching. It trembled in his hand as if it was trying to break free. Chapter 2347, The Grand Exalt's Descendant, 2. Staring at the trembling imprint that was trying to break free from his grasp, Jian Chen's eyes shone brightly. He became both surprised and doubtful. Afterwards, he glanced at the distance, looking past the group of radiant Saint Masters. The light in his eyes flickered. He was uncertain about the reason behind the Grand Exalt's legacy imprint behaving like this, wanting to fly off by itself. However, there was something he was certain about. He knew that the sudden behavior of the imprint was related to a radiant Saint Master among them. Whatever. Our priority is to protect the Grand Exalt's legacy imprint. At this moment, another person called out. Another hallowed Saint Master who had reached the limits of mid-god king began to break through. He became a late god king resolutely. He was also one of the lords of the 99 peaks. He was powerful, having suppressed his cultivation at mid-god king for a very long time. His breakthrough at this moment was effortless, completed in a matter of seconds. Moreover, he was also one of the 16 god kings who wielded god artifacts. The bold breakthroughs of the two and their fearless spirit influenced many of the nearby radiant god kings. After seeing that, they all bellowed out in high spirits. The mist of the Tower of Radiance will completely disperse before long. At that time, we'll be able to stay in the Tower of Radiance for long periods of time. There's no need to worry about that great demon. We have nothing to worry about. Only by becoming late god kings can we unleash more of the god artifact's power and deal with the threat of Qing Shan. Immediately, powerful presences burst out one after another. At that moment, many radiant god kings made up their minds. They all broke through. Of course, every single person who broke through in that instance had kept their cultivation suppressed for many years. They had already reached late god king in terms of comprehension, so breaking through only required a thought for them. They met no obstructions or difficulties. Of course, not all of them were like that. Basically every single person who possessed such a cultivation was a lord of the 99 main peaks. Donglin Xueqi sighed gently. At that moment, she could only break through reluctantly, or she would become a joke within the Radiant Saint Hall as one of the 99 lords of main peaks. She would be known as someone who feared death if she did not. Even the Donglin clan behind her would probably be humiliated. In that short moment, over 40 late radiant god kings appeared. Almost half of the 99 lords of main peaks had broken through. Kill, take back the imprint. The Lord of the Scorching Sun Peak, Gong Sunji, bellowed out. He ignited his essence blood, burning his vitality to unleash more power from his god artifact. He charged towards Jian Chen aggressively. After Gong Sun Ji, the 15 other wielders of God artifacts all used secret techniques to boost their cultivation at quite a hefty cost. They unleashed even more power from their God artifacts and attacked Jian Chen simultaneously. Unless you break though again by condensing a soul tree and reach the primordial realm, you still pose no threat to me, Jian Chen said coldly. Even though these people had grown more powerful, even though the God artifacts were stronger than before, he still did not take them seriously. He only took a single step, and he crossed the several-kilometer distance to appear before them like he had teleported. He did not use the laws of the sword this time. Instead, he directly threw a punch. Not only did the punch contain the power of his chaotic body, but it also possessed the laws of strength. Under the amplification of the laws of strength, the shocking punch became even more terrifying. The punch shot out and caused space to rupture. He directly struck a God artifact, sending it back to where it came from. The weapon pierced its master's chest. Afterwards, Jian Chen threw out consecutive punches. The power was extremely terrifying, causing space to tremble. All 16 God artifacts were knocked back, causing them to dim. Aside from Donglin Xueqi, all the other God artifact wielders had been knocked away while blood sprayed from their mouths. However, at this moment, certain globules of the fallen blood directly flew towards Jian Chen as if it was under the guidance of some mysterious power. More correctly, it flew towards the Grand Exalt's legacy imprint in Jian Chen's hand. A gleam of light flashed through Jian Chen's eyes. He clenched the imprint tightly in his left hand as he sent out a strand of sword qi with his right. He cut the globule to pieces before incinerating it all with chaotic flames. Even though the blood had been burnt to nothingness, Jian Chen could still sense an invisible power that managed to survive. It could not be found with the senses of his soul. He only managed to discover it with his special soul. It was absorbed by the imprint in his hand. Immediately, the imprint shone brightly at it became even more scorching. It shook violently in Jian Chen's hand. The Grand Exalt's legacy was an imprint of consciousness. Yet in that moment, Jian Chen actually felt like the imprint of consciousness had sprung alive after absorbing the power from the blood. You're actually the one who's making the Grand Exalt's legacy imprint tremble. Jian Chen suddenly looked at Gong Sun Ji. He was shocked because the blood from earlier came from Gong Sun Ji. However, after Gong Sun Ji's blood was incinerated by the chaotic flames, even the mysterious power had become extremely thin. It was even so thin that the power of the bloodline within it had almost collapsed. However, Gong Sun Ji's face changed drastically. He stared at the imprint in Jian Chen's hand in shock before ravishing in joy. He was overjoyed. This was because he had suddenly discovered that an extremely obscure connection seemed to be established between him and the imprint. At this moment, the Grand Exalt's legacy imprint in Jian Chen's hand struggled even more. It seemed to have become a scathing brand, doing all it could to break free from Jian Chen's control. Although Jian Chen had passed the test and removed the imprint from the steel, the imprint did not seem to recognize Jian Chen anymore. The resistance from the Grand Exalt's legacy imprint became greater and greater. Jian Chen knew that if this continued, the imprint would break free from his grasp in the end. He bellowed out and no longer paid any more attention to the Radiant Saint Masters. Instead, he suddenly pressed the imprint against the area between his eyes and began to accept what was inside. However, he encountered resistance. The consciousness within the imprint rejected Jian Chen's entry as if it did not accept him. Jian Chen snorted coldly inside and used martial soul force. A strand of it flowed under his control and approached the imprint. As expected, as soon as it sensed the approach of the martial soul force, the consciousness within the imprint no longer stood in his way, letting him in. Jian Chen's soul immediately took advantage of the situation and entered, permeating the imprint. He sensed the tremendous information inside. He did two things at the same time. As he comprehended and absorbed the information within the imprint, he suppressed the Grand Exalt's legacy imprint with all that he had. This was because the imprint constantly shook. It wanted to break free from Jian Chen's restraint at all times. He has already begun accepting the legacy. Quick, kill him. Gong Sun Ji's eyes turned bloodshot. He had already established an obscure mental connection with the imprint, so he believed he had gained the recognition of the legacy. The legacy belonged to him. Now that Jian Chen was forcefully comprehending the imprint and absorbing the legacy hidden within it, he saw it as Jian Chen directly taking his possessions brazenly. How could he let this slide? Chapter 2348. The Grand Exalt's Descendant, 3. The Lord of the Scorching Sun Peak, Gong Sun Ji, seemed to become crazy. He used a secret technique to burn his life force, unleashing as much of the power of his god artifact as he could to attack Jian Chen. He tried to stop him from taking the legacy. He already believed that the Grand Exalt's legacy imprint was his. Whatever Jian Chen took from the imprint, it would mean him losing that part of the legacy. At this moment, Jian Chen absorbed the contents of the imprint as quickly as he could. The Grand Exalt's legacy imprint struggled more and more. If this continued, it would break free from him before long. As a result, he no longer had any spare time to deal with the Radiant God Kings. He just stood in the air, submerging his entire mind into the imprint. At that moment, it seemed like he did not put up any defenses against the outer world at all. This time, Gong Sun Ji unleashed all the power he could with his god artifact, swinging it heavily towards Jian Chen with astonishing pulse of energy. Immediately, with a heavy boom, Jian Chen was struck by Gong Sun Ji's sword. This scene stunned Gong Sun Ji, probably because even he did not imagine he would strike Jian Chen so easily. However, he then became overjoyed. He knew extremely well that Jian Chen had not put up any defenses against his attack. He had completely endured it with his body. According to Gong Sun Ji's belief, no matter how powerful, no matter how great Jian Chen's body was, he would definitely have to pay a heavy price after taking on a strike from a god artifact. Even if he did not die, he would be left half alive. Behind Gong Sun Ji, the other Radiant God Kings with god artifacts all became overjoyed when they saw Jian Chen take on Gong Sun Ji's god artifact attack. Immediately, they controlled their god artifacts and sent them towards Jian Chen. They all used their full strength in an attempt to kill off Jian Chen completely. Immediately, booms constantly rang out. Jian Chen did not fight back against their attacks. He did not even dodge. He withstood their attacks with his body. The god artifacts immediately knocked Jian Chen around as they struck his slender body with soaring might. In the end, a huge hammer fell from the sky, striking Jian Chen's head like a bolt of lightning. The powerful pulses of energy caused space to distort. Jian Chen immediately struck the ground. What's this all about? Why has the invincible Chongyang suddenly become unable to fight back? It must be because of the Grand Exalt's legacy imprint. Chongyang probably wanted to comprehend the imprint, but it did not recognize him in the end. It has sucked away his soul, severing his senses of the outside world. Fantastic. We can kill him effortless now. A lot of people are saying that Chongyang is Qing Shan in disguise. If we really kill him, the martial soul lineage will lose a member. That's a service of great merit. The merit of killing Chongyang will belong to all of us. Let's all take action, and we'll all be rewarded. In the distance, many Radiant Saint Masters called out and poured over. It was as if Chongyang was already dead in their eyes even though he was invincible moments earlier. However, the Radiant God Kings with God artifacts were unable to lighten up at all. Instead, their hearts weighed heavily as their faces were very ugly, as they did not see even a single droplet of blood. Someone who possessed a similar level of cultivation to them had taken on over a dozen attacks from god artifacts with his bare body, yet not even blood had been drawn. Who would believe this if they did not witness it with their own eyes? Method of the Exalted Saint. At the same time, Jian Chen's mind shook as he completely submerged himself within the Grand Exalt's legacy imprint. He ravished with joy. He had finally found the Grand Exalt's cultivation method in the imprint. The cultivation method was created by the past master of the Tower of Radiance. It was called the Method of the Exalted Saint. Absorb it. Without any hesitation, Jian Chen immediately absorbed everything related to the cultivation method. Immediately, the portion of the imprint that bore the details of the cultivation method poured into Jian Chen's head like a flood. Jian Chen immediately felt his head swell painfully as all the tremendous information was forced into his head. The amount of information was just too great, so great that Jian Chen even found it a little too much with his current level of cultivation. Outside, all the Radiant God Kings with God artifacts gathered around Jian Chen. Their eyes had widened as they stared straight at Jian Chen, who sat on the ground. Their eyes were filled with undisguised shock. Many wounds covered Jian Chen. They came from the god artifacts in their hands. But without any exception, all of the wounds were just scratches. They were nowhere close to harming his organs. It was not even enough to draw blood. What made them even more surprised was that Jian Chen's wounds actually healed at a visible rate. In just a few seconds, the injuries they had inflicted on Jian Chen with god artifacts completely vanished. Not a single scar was left behind. The sight of this left all of them stunned. The powerful lords of main peaks with their god artifacts were all dumbfounded as if they had just seen a ghost. How is this possible? Gong Sunji said with a trembling voice as if he had been heavily affected by this outcome. He's currently absorbing the legacy imprint, so he can't divert any attention to the outside. Let's keep attacking and see just how long he can last. One of them called out and immediately continued his attacks with his god artifact. The other god artifact wielders took part as well. Afterwards, the group of Radiant Saint Masters who had surged over participated as well. All of them unleashed their most powerful attacks at Jian Chen. Immediately, the laws of the hallowed surged in the surroundings. The powerful energy wreaked havoc on the earth mercilessly. Jian Chen had already become submerged by attacks. But very soon, all of them were left dumbfounded. Just like before, Jian Chen only suffered a few scratches after taking on all their attacks. Moreover, these scratches had only been inflicted by the god artifacts. In other words, no matter how powerful the Radiant God Kings were, including the ones who had broken through to late God King, none of them had the right to harm Jian Chen at all as long as they did not possess a god artifact. Heavens, is he even human? Everyone gasped. What they just witnessed completely upheaved their understanding of the world. If they were facing a primordial realm expert, they could accept it at the very least. However, their opponent just happened to be a god king just like them. At this moment, Jian Chen completely received all the information regarding the method of the Exalted Saint. He had completely grasped the unprecedented Grand Exalt's cultivation method. However, the legacy imprint was not as simple as a single cultivation method. There were also powerful radiant arts and extremely ancient secret techniques from a whole different aeon. There was even the knowledge on cultivation personally penned by the Grand Exalt as well as the comprehension and understanding of laws. Jian Chen did not waste any time after accepting the method of the Exalted Saint completely. He tried to absorb the other contents of the imprint. But at this moment, the legacy imprint he had suppressed within his hand suddenly became scorching hot. Its power increased by countless times in that instance, and it immediately broke free from Jian Chen's grasp. It flew out and arrived before Gong Sunji. How could Jian Chen allow such a thing to happen? He bellowed out, and his presence erupted. He arrived before Gong Sunji in a single instance, directly reaching out towards him. However, a power from the Tower of Radiance appeared silently, enveloping Gong Sunji completely. It protected him. The Tower of Radiance was a peak god artifact, an item on the same level as the Anata Tower. As a result, Jian Chen was insignificant as an ant before the power. He was unable to harm Gong Sunji. With a flash, the Grand Exalt's legacy imprint vanished between Gong Sunji's eyes as a streak of light. Gong Sunji closed his eyes and collapsed as stiff as a board. He fell unconscious. All the Radiant Saint Masters there immediately became stunned by this. Everyone looked away from Jian Chen and focused on Gong Sunji. They were confused. No one knew what had just happened. Artifact Spirit. Jian Chen looked at Gong Sunji deeply and secretly called for the artifact spirit. Master HH. He has the bloodline of the past master of the Tower of Radiance flowing through him. He's a descendant of the past master. The artifact spirit's voice rang out within Jian Chen's head. His voice was also filled with shock and disbelief. I've learned from the lingering consciousness of the artifact spirit of the Tower of Radiance that the past master is not a sovereign of this aeon, nor is he a sovereign of the past aeon. He was from the one before that. I really never thought, the bloodline of the past master would be able to survive for 2 eons. Master, I still don't have full control over the Tower of Radiance, and the lingering consciousness of the artifact spirit of the Tower of Radiance is affecting me at all times. I can't remove this power that protects the Grand Exalt's descendant, said the artifact spirit. Although he had become a part of the Tower of Radiance, he had spent far too little time in this state. Moreover, he had fused with too much of the lingering consciousness from the artifact spirit of the Tower of Radiance, so he would be influenced by the lingering consciousness most of the time. There was nothing that he could do. Jian Chen sank into his thoughts. He was not surprised by this because he had already been expecting this to be the final outcome ever since he discovered the Grand Exalt's legacy imprint reaction to Gong Sunji's bloodline. The imprint had been removed from the steel through his comprehension of the diagram. Logically speaking, He was supposed to inherit everything within the imprint, but he had never thought that the descendant of the past master of the Tower of Radiance would appear. The legacy imprint was intelligent. Although he fulfilled the conditions, he was still an outsider to the imprint, while the blood of the person who had left behind the imprint in the first place flowed through Gong Sun-ji's blood vessels. He was the descendant of the Grand Exalt. The legacy imprint would naturally choose a descendant over an outsider. Although Jian Chen might have been able to inherit everything if he had killed Gong Sun-ji earlier, he would have never done something like that because such an act would violate his morals. If Gong Sun-ji was completely unrelated to the past master of the Tower of Radiance, so be it. However, he was the past master's descendant after all. Method of the Exalted Saint. The details of the method of the Exalted Saint are actually gone. Chongyang, return my method of the Exalted Saint. Gong Sun-ji awakened several dozen kilometers away. He had flown into a fury, charging towards Jian Chen madly as hatred burned within his eyes. The cultivation method was the most important thing within the Grand Exalt's legacy imprint. Without the impressive cultivation method, he would struggle to reach the peak even with the Grand Exalt's notes on comprehension and cultivation as well as the ancient secret techniques. One day, he would find himself unable to take a step forward due to the limitations of his cultivation method. The Master of the Tower of Radiance is my ancestor. My ancestor's bloodline flows within me. I'm the one who's supposed to inherit my ancestor's legacy. You have no right at all to take it. Return my method of the Exalted Saint, Gong Sun-ji bellowed out. He had already learnt about everything from the Grand Exalt's legacy imprint. He had learnt that he possessed a noble bloodline. As a result, he treated the Grand Exalt's legacy imprint as his personal possession. He would not allow anyone to take it. What? The Tower of Radiance's master is Gong Sun-ji's ancestor? All the Radiant Saint Masters in the miniature world were stunned by Gong Sun-ji's calls. Gong Sun-ji, even if you have a Grand Exalt's blood flowing through you, you would have never been fated to obtain the legacy imprint without me. You should be thankful, Jian Chen snorted coldly. He had expended a lot for the Grand Exalt's cultivation method. The origin of ways could be ignored. After all, the origin of ways had assisted the artifact spirit in obtaining the Tower of Radiance. Now that the artifact spirit had successfully become part of the Tower of Radiance, the origin of ways could not be considered as wasted. After all, he had received something in return. However, Jian Chen was confident that no one in the Radiant Saint Hall aside from himself could comprehend the diagram within the stele. Even the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall would not be able to. The final test in the diagram had nothing to do with talent or affinity for comprehension. It required martial soul force. If the diagram was a treasure chest, martial soul force was the key to it. As a result, martial soul force was required to remove the Grand Exalt's legacy method from the stele. Jian Chen waved his hand and light immediately flashed. A huge strand of sword chi dozens of meters in length shot towards Gong Sun-ji with blinding light. Gong Sun-ji was protected by the Tower of Radiance, so Jian Chen's attack failed to harm him. However, the force from the sword chi knocked him far away. Artifact Spirit, open the gateway. Jian Chen contacted the Artifact Spirit after the strike. Yes, Master. The Artifact Spirit responded. He had already recovered quite a lot of power while Jian Chen was comprehending the diagram. In the next moment, the space behind Jian Chen twisted violently, and a gate rapidly formed. Opening a gate from within the miniature world was far easier than opening one from the outside. This time, the artifact spirit did not take too long to open it up successfully. Let's go. Come with me. It won't be good if you stay, Jian Chen said to Donglin Yanxue before pulling her through the gate while she remained in a daze. They vanished. Many of the Radiant Saint Masters saw the gate open up, and all of them ran over with lightning speed. They wanted to leave the miniature world. These people were all weaker hallowed Saint Masters. Due to their weaker strength, they would be completely useless even if they continued to stay. They wanted to leave and spread the news that a member of the martial soul lineage had broken into the Tower of Radiance. However, the gate closed extremely quickly. As soon as Jian Chen and Donglin Yanxue had left, it closed up, giving them no chance to leave. God damn it. What's up with the gate? Why did it close up as soon as Chongyang left? That's strange. Why do I feel like the gate opened up just for Chongyang? Many Radiant Saint Master cursed. They all found this matter strange. Donglin Xueqi stood with the other peak lords with god artifacts. They stared in the direction that Jian Chen had vanished into as they sank into their thoughts. Just who is this Chongyang? Donglin Xueqi asked sternly. It doesn't matter who he is, but he definitely isn't Qing Shan. His actions and behaviors don't match up at all, the Lord of the Sky-Gazing Peak said emotionlessly. He really doesn't seem like Qing Shan. If he were Qing Shan, we would not be alive right now. In reality, he already showed mercy when he attacked us before, said another peak lord as he sighed gently. Gong Sun Ji is actually a descendant of the Master of the Tower of Radiance. But fortunately he was here. He stopped the martial soul lineage from taking away the complete legacy. Another peak lord felt fortunate. Although he felt envious and jealous of Gong Sun Ji, it was better than having the martial soul lineage taking the legacy away. Chongyang, I really never thought you'd be a part of the martial soul lineage. Since you're from the martial soul lineage, why don't you kill me? I'm the current chosen saint of the Radiant Saint Hall. Killing me would be a wonderful slap to the Radiant Saint Hall's face, right? Jian Chen and Donglin Yanxue reappeared in the mountain ranges outside. Several months had passed, so the mountain range had completely quietened down. It returned to its previous remote state. However, Donglin Yanxue took a few steps back after leaving the miniature world. She maintained her distance from Jian Chen, staring at him sharply. There was undisguised pain in the depths of her eyes. You should be able to tell that I actually hold no ill intentions towards your Radiant Saint Hall, or the Radiant God Kings in the miniature world definitely would not be still alive. That's because with my strength, killing them all will be a piece of cake even if they've broken through to late God King. Even if they have so many god artifacts, Jian Chen said seriously. You're not Qing Shan, so who are you? Donglin Yanxue asked. Jian Chen's actions were completely different from Qing Shan's. This allowed her to determine that they were two different people. The Radiant God Kings that claimed he was Qing Shan in disguise in the miniature world were wrong. Jian Chen looked at Donglin Yanxue and sighed gently. Actually, I'm Jian Chen. Donglin Yanxue quivered when she heard that. She stared at Jian Chen in surprise as disbelief filled her face. She had never seen Jian Chen, but she was simply far too familiar with that name. She was so familiar with it that she even knew quite a lot of Jian Chen's past. It was not just Donglin Yanxue. Basically everyone across the entire desolate plain knew Jian Chen's name. In recent years, experts had gathered on the desolate plain. Foreign peak experts roamed the desolate plain recklessly, basically creating a huge ruckus. They stifled the peak organizations on the desolate plain. In the very end, the blood medallion even appeared as the only form of identity verification on the desolate plain. All of this happened because of a single person. And this person was obviously Jian Chen. As a result, Donglin Yanxue immediately thought of everything she knew about him when she heard his name. In the past, he had risen up in the Neptunian Divine Palace, standing up against so many supreme god kings. He protected a weak little girl with all that he could so that she could inherit the Neptunian Divine Palace. In the end, he even caused an event that basically shook up the entire Saints world. He was directly responsible for the deaths of around half of all the supreme god kings on the god king's throne. Afterwards, he faced the pursuit of the famed Heavenly King of Azure Brilliance and Solitary Sword Ancestor. After exposing the Anata Tower on planet Tianming, he became the target of all the peak experts in the Saints world. In the end, he fled to the desolate plain and seemed to vanish completely. Even when the peak experts overturned every stone in the desolate plain and used everything that they had, they still failed to find him. As a matter of fact, without any exaggeration, Jian Chen was a figure of legends in Donglin Yanxue's heart. After all, he was only a god king, yet he evaded the pursuit and search of peak experts time and time again. This was basically an impossible feat in the eyes of many people. However, Jian Chen had accomplished the impossible. As a result, many people across the Saints world felt admiration towards Jian Chen. Donglin Yanxue happened to be one of them. Hey, are you really Jian Chen? Donglin Yanxue stared at Jian Chen blankly. She had never thought that the Jian Chen that the peak experts were looking for so many years, including even the vice leaders of the Radiant Saint Hall, had actually been hiding in the Radiant Saint Hall the entire time. Such a legendary person had actually been beside her the entire time. Afterwards, the two of them had even spent a year together in the world of Moon and Star. It made Donglin Yanxue's head spin. Qing Shan suddenly appeared back then in the world of moon and star. Was it because of you? Donglin Yanxue asked soon afterwards. Jian Chen shook his head and replied, "It actually had nothing to do with me. Although I also possess martial soul force, I didn't know Qing Shan at all before I entered the world of moon and star. I had no connection to the martial soul lineage either." Donglin Yanshue's heart eased up slightly. After learning that Jian Chen had nothing to do with Qing Shan, she felt slightly better. In other words, I managed to escape from Qing Shan because of you? The attack from the vicious beast was a complete lie? After you fainted, I fought Qing Shan. You fought Qing Shan for my sake? Donglin Yanxue had completely accepted the shock from the reveal of Jian Chen's true identity. Now, she stared at Jian Chen with shining eyes. I'm leaving the Tower of Radiance, so I'll be bidding farewell to you here. Jian Chen did not answer Donglin Yanxue. He wanted to leave after throwing that down. Hold on. There are definitely elders watching over the Tower of Radiance outside. If you leave alone, it'll look very suspicious. You'll struggle to make it out of the Radiant Saint Hall. Donglin Yanxue stopped Jian Chen in time and said, "You better let me take you out. If I'm by your side, it'll save you a lot of trouble. You can't have your identity exposed right now. You already know my true identity, yet you still want to help me. If the upper echelon of the Radiant Saint Hall learn about this, you'll be in deep trouble." Jian Chen looked at Donglin Yanxue deeply. "It's not a problem at all. I'll just forsake the position of chosen saint, that's all. We shouldn't tarry. Let's go." Donglin Yanxue completely accepted everything that she would be facing. With that, she flew towards the exit of the Tower of Radiance first. Jian Chen sighed inside as he looked at Donglin Yanxue before following her closely. The journey back was smooth. Several days later, Jian Chen and Donglin Yanxue arrived at the exit. "Master, I still need some time to fully grasp the Tower of Radiance, so I probably won't be able to leave with you," the artifact spirit's voice rang out at this moment. "Artifact spirit, there's no need to follow me. Just stay here and take your time to grasp the power of the Tower of Radiance. Moreover, there's a formation personally cast down by the Grand Exalt of Ancient Paths outside. It locks the Tower of Radiance firmly to the Sacred Hall, which prevents anyone from taking the Tower of Radiance away. As long as the Grand Exalt's formation remains intact, you probably won't be able to break free even if you gain complete control over the Tower of Radiance," Jian Chen communicated with the artifact spirit. "The Lord of the Soaring Clouds Peak, Han Xian, was once my teacher. Bai Yu is my junior sister. Speaking of which, they were the people closest to me in the years I spent in the Radiant Saint Hall. If they enter the Tower of Radiance in the future, look after them for me." "Yes, Master." Chongyang. The exit of the Tower of Radiance was empty. Donglin Yanxue stood there as the light in her eyes flickered. She stared at Jian Chen's ordinary face with mixed feelings and said, "You're about to leave and who knows whether we'll meet again in the future. This might be the last time I see you, so can I see your true appearance?" "As you wish." With a thought, the mask on Jian Chen's face slowly vanished, revealing his true appearance. Immediately, the familiar face that Donglin Yanxue had seen who knows how many times was presented before her. It was a determined, handsome face. The facial features were sharp and refined, and it bore a sense of coldness that could only be developed through bloody hardships. The pair of eyes shone brightly and were piercing like swords. When one stared into them, they seemed to hide invisible sword intent. As she looked at Jian Chen's true appearance, Donglin Yanxue only felt Chongyang's only imperfection had been fixed perfectly. She stared at Jian Chen's face in a daze as if she was trying to embed his true appearance into the depths of her heart. At the same time, over a dozen powerful presences flooded into the Radiant Saint Hall. Over a dozen peak experts stood with their hands behind their backs outside the Radiant Saint Hall. They all took a single stride and appeared in the territory of the Radiant Saint Hall with a flash. "Everyone, what are you trying to do?" The leader of the Radiant Saint Hall immediately appeared and stared at them with a sunken face. "Please do not become angered, leader. We've come to wait for Chongyang," a person chuckled from among the experts. He acted rather friendly. "The untested people from the other peak organizations have all undergone the test now. Their identities have been confirmed. Only Chongyang remains. Please do not take offense, leader. Just treat us as guests who are visiting you," the outsider said amiably. They laughed and joked. However, the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall knew that they only behaved like this because they feared the Celestial Sword Saint. They were afraid of going overboard, which would draw out the Celestial Sword Saint. The leader of the Radiant Saint Hall's face was originally sunken, but when he heard that Chongyang was the only person who had not undergone the blood test, his eyes immediately shone. Are you saying that a disciple of my Radiant Saint Hall is actually Chongyang? The leader of the Radiant Saint Hall asked coldly before shaking his head. That's impossible. Jian Chen is a fighter. He can't be a Radiant Saint Master. That's difficult to say. What if Jian Chen is the 8th member of the martial soul lineage? There's no need to jump to conclusions, leader. Since Chongyang is the only untested person right now, it's extremely likely for him to be Jian Chen. Of course, we haven't tested him personally, so we're not completely certain, the outsider said leisurely. They glanced at the sacred hall that stood above the clouds, perhaps unintentionally, and burning greed filled the depths of their eyes. They happened to look towards the top floor of the sacred hall, where the Tower of Radiance stood. The Tower of Radiance was a peak god artifact used by a Grand Exalt in the past. It was on the same level as the Anata Tower. Such a powerful god artifact would obviously tempt all the experts in the Saints' world. However, the Grand Exalt of Ancient Paths formation had locked the Tower of Radiance in place, severing all hopes of obtaining the god artifact. There was nothing they could do about the Tower of Radiance. At this moment, another group of a similar size arrived. However, they seemed to maintain a much lower profile than the outsiders. They all concealed their presence, making them seem just like ordinary people. They flew over at a steady pace. They were also peak experts, the type who could make the entire desolate plain tremor from a few gestures. They stood on the same level as the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall. They were the native experts of the desolate plain. An old man in dragon robes stood out very much among the group of native experts. Even though he kept his presence concealed, he would still give off an astonishing bearing, causing the surroundings to tremble. He seemed to be the strongest out of the entire group. The old man was the ancestral emperor of an everlasting empire on the desolate plain, the Daohuang Empire. Let's wait for the junior called Chongyang to come out of the Tower of Radiance and get him tested. Once his identity has been confirmed, please leave here immediately, the ancestral emperor said. His old, dignified voice was filled with a firmness that could not be defied. The native organizations of the desolate plain had already become irritated by these outsiders since a long time ago. The outsiders felt no fear towards the ancestral emperor of the Daohuang Empire. They remained composed and one of them said, "Of course. Once we test Chongyang and verify that he's not Jian Chen, all of us will leave the desolate plain." "I hope you can keep your word," the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall said coldly. He glanced past the group of people with the ancestral emperor and clasped his fist. "Since everyone has already come, why don't you enter the sacred hall? I'll send people to summon Chongyang." Afterwards, this group of people who would remain significant wherever they went entered the sacred hall with the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall. At the same time, one of the 8 vice leaders, Xianzhan, stood on the top floor of the Radiant Saint Hall as he stared at the entrance to the Tower of Radiance with brimming interest. "Xianzhan, all of the outsiders have already gathered in our Radiant Saint Hall. Chongyang is the last person to be tested. It's extremely likely for him to be Jian Chen in disguise. Enter the Tower of Radiance immediately and get him tested." At this moment, the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall's voice rang out in Xianzhan's head. A gleam of light flashed through Xianzhan's eyes, and they immediately deepened. At the same time, a huge estate sat quietly in a corner of an extremely bustling city in the central region of the desolate plain. There was a small building in the depths of the estate. A middle-aged man stood outside. He bowed as he reported some information politely. "Senior 2, aside from a disciple of the Radiant Saint Hall called Chongyang, everyone on the desolate plain has been tested now. It's extremely likely that this Radiant Saint Master is Jian Chen in disguise. Both the outsiders and native experts have gathered at the Radiant Saint Hall. Senior 2, do you think we should go as well? Chongyang? Radiant Saint Master? Is Jian Chen a part of the martial soul lineage?" An old voice rang out from the building. "We are unable to verify this right now," the middle-aged man replied politely. "I understand. You are dismissed." "Yes, Senior 2. The middle-aged man backed away politely. A black-robed old man sat within the pavilion. He looked in the direction of the Radiant Saint Hall and murmured, "Jian Chen sure is hard to find. However, he is extraordinary. He can actually evade the heavenly secrets, preventing all of us from forecasting even a trace of him. Even Master is unable to do anything about it. I just wonder whether this person called Chong Yang is Jian Chen in disguise. I hope he is, or who knows when we'll be able to find Jian Chen. Master has become rather impatient. We can just toss the Anata Tower out there for them to fight over it. I only need to take Jian Chen back to complete the mission." At the same time, in a verdant estate brimming with life in another bustling city, a benevolent-looking old man explained the mysteries of the ways to a beautiful woman in a green dress who only seemed to be in her 20s. "Adriana, you've recently reached the primordial realm, so your usage and understanding of the way of life has reached a completely new level. However, Infinite Prime is only the start of the primordial realm. You still have a very long path ahead of you, so you are still lacking in many aspects in your comprehension of the way of life." At this moment, a middle-aged man made his way over quickly and stopped in the distance. He said politely, "Hall Elder, there's news about Jian Chen." The eyes of the woman in green who was listening to the old woman's explanations immediately lit up. She looked at the middle-aged man and said before the old woman could reply, "There's finally news." "Where is he?" "Everyone is focused on a Radiant Saint Master called Chong Yang in the Radiant Saint Hall right now, because he's the only untested person left. Many people suspect him to be Jian Chen," said the middle-aged man. "A disciple of the Radiant Saint Hall? Does Jian Chen possess martial soul force? Otherwise, it will be impossible for him to disguise himself as a Radiant Saint Master." The old woman frowned when she heard this news. Adriana smacked her forehead in annoyance. She grumbled, "Sigh, how did I forget about that? Jian Chen is not just a fighter. Elder, Chong Yang is probably Jian Chen because Jian Chen is also a Radiant Saint Master. Let's go to the Radiant Saint Hall immediately," Adriana said to the old woman beside her. She had remained in a lower world for several million years as the elven god tree. She was one of the people who had known Jian Chen for the longest, so she naturally knew Jian Chen was a talented Radiant Saint Master and a fighter. She even knew that he was the only Class 9 Radiant Saint Master on the Tian Yuan continent. There's no need to hurry. There's no need to hurry at all. Since Jian Chen can remain hidden for so long, he's definitely skilled at it. Let's see Jian Chen's upcoming performance first. After all, his escape from the hands of the Heavenly King of Azure Brilliance was a first. Perhaps the Heavenly King of Azure Brilliance's strength isn't the greatest, but he really does have almost unmatched speed across the entire Saints world. Escaping from him is extremely difficult even for Grand Primes, let alone God Kings, said the old woman mysteriously as she squinted. After Xian Zhan received the message outside the Tower of Radiance, the light in his eyes flickered rapidly. His gaze would be piercing at times and calm at other times. He was clearly deeply conflicted. However, he gradually calmed down. He dismissed all the elders nearby before slowly turning around. He faced the entrance with his back. He stared at the hazy white sea of clouds outside the Tower of Radiance as his gaze deepened. At this moment, the screen of light near the entrance of the Tower of Radiance pulsed. Jian Chen and Donglin Yanxue suddenly appeared. As soon as they emerged, they discovered Vice Leader Xian Zhan standing right before them. Immediately, they became taken aback. Donglin Yanxue greets the Vice Leader. Donglin Yanxue immediately bowed and glanced at Jian Chen beside her. Her heart could not help but tighten. Chong Yang greets the Vice Leader. Jian Chen also clasped his hands and bowed. He glanced at the Vice Leader's back as he suddenly felt an ill omen. He could clearly sense that something was off with the Vice Leader. "You've come out." At this moment, Xian Zhan turned around. He was calm as if nothing had happened at all. However, his dignified, fierce eyes were abnormally deep. "Many matters have happened recently. Many peak experts on the desolate plain have gathered within the sacred hall. Donglin Yanxue, although your status is no lower than an elder's, you need to be careful in the next few days. Don't run into these people, all right?" Xian Zhan continued as he looked at Donglin Yanxue with shining eyes. Donglin Yanshue's expression immediately changed slightly, and she responded in a hurry. Jian Chen's heart sank. He glanced at Xian Zhan deeply. Although Xian Zhan was talking to Donglin Yanxue, he felt like the Vice Leader was purposefully directing these words towards him. "Have I been discovered already?" Jian Chen thought. Now that all the experts had gathered in the Radiant Saint Hall, Jian Chen's suspicions were basically confirmed. The Tower of Radiance resides in a forbidden ground, so don't stay here. Leave immediately, just in case you violate any rules. Xianzhan waved his hand and said indifferently. Afterwards, Donglin Yanxue left in a hurry with Jian Chen. Xianzhan, Chongyang is extremely likely to be Jian Chen. Are you just going to let him go like this? You need to know that if he's Jian Chen, he's also the 8th member of the martial soul lineage. If he matures in the future, he'll become a huge threat to our Radiant Saint Hall. The voice of the Radiant Saint Hall's leader rang out in Xianzhan's head again after Jian Chen and Donglin Yanxue's departure. With the voice, an illusionary body conjured from a sliver of the leader's soul silently appeared. He looked at Xianzhan in confusion. He must leave here. Xianzhan showed no politeness towards the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall as he stared in the direction that Jian Chen had left in. Xianzhan, I really don't understand why you want to protect him. After all, he might belong to the martial soul lineage. What happened in the world of Moon and Star might be directly related to him. The leader of the Radiant Saint Hall looked at Xianzhan helplessly. Because he brought me this. With a wave of his hand, a jade bottle and a jade slip was tossed to the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall. The leader was curious. He directly opened the jade bottle and saw a droplet of bright red blood within it. When he saw the blood, the leader's eyes immediately flashed with light. He said sternly, "This is Shen Ming's blood." Very soon, the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall understood everything. He said gently, "I'm basically certain that Chongyang is Jian Chen now. If I've guessed correctly, Shen Ming must be in the Anata Tower." Xianzhan nodded and continued sternly, "That's only one of the reasons. The second reason is that if he doesn't leave and is directly exposed in the Radiant Saint Hall, the outsiders will definitely try to capture him regardless of the cost. They'll start fighting in the Radiant Saint Hall. They're all Grand Primes and possess devastating power. Once they start fighting in our Radiant Saint Hall, the result will be unthinkable. Chongyang, what should we do now?" At the same time, Donglin Yanxue and Jian Chen moved through the sacred hall in a hurry. Right now, she had become rather flustered. After all, many peak experts had gathered in the Radiant Saint Hall. All of them had come for Jian Chen, so Donglin Yanxue immediately became clueless about what to do since she had never faced a situation remotely like this before. "I'll leave the Radiant Saint Hall first. As long as I make it out of the protective formations, everything will become much easier," Jian Chen replied secretly. The sacred hall was very large. He and Donglin Yanxue basically chose an extremely obscure path, avoiding as many people as possible as they directly made their way out of the sacred hall. Fortunately, the sacred hall itself was a god artifact. It could block the senses of the soul, so Jian Chen and Donglin Yanxue did not need to worry about the outsiders discovering them. Very soon, Jian Chen and Donglin Yanxue made it out of the sacred hall unobstructed. Without any hesitation, they directly flew towards the protective formation around the Radiant Saint Hall. Many Radiant Saint Masters hurried through the mist and clouds with Radiant Saint force. Jian Chen and Donglin Yanxue were enveloped by light as well, so it was very difficult to recognize them. Just like that, they managed to disguise themselves among all the Radiant Saint Masters. Soon, they made it to the protective formation safely. "Stop! Who are you, and why don't you have the presence of the blood medallion?" However, as soon as they emerged from the protective formation, a husky voice rang out. A bald old man suddenly appeared before Jian Chen. He gave off a powerful presence. He happened to be an infinite prime, and he looked at Jian Chen judgmentally. "I'm Donglin Yanxue. And who are you, sir? The matters of our Radiant Saint Hall aren't something that you outsiders should stick your noses into." Donglin Yanxue dispersed the light around her and called out with a frown. They were right outside the protective formations of the Radiant Saint Hall, so she feared no one. "Donglin Yanxue? So you're the current chosen saint of the Radiant Saint Hall. Humph, if it weren't for that identity, I would have made you suffer after what you just said so that you can learn what the outcome is for disrespecting your seniors." The bald old man sneered at Donglin Yanxue before looking at Jian Chen. He demanded sternly, "Hand over your blood medallion, or I can only arrest you." Donglin Yanxue immediately started to panic when she saw how forceful and persistent the bald old man was. She worried for Jian Chen. However, Jian Chen remained calm. He said, "Please do not become flustered, senior. The item you're looking for is in my space ring. Since Senior wants to check it, I'll take it out. Compared to the chosen saint, you're indeed slightly more pleasant. Hurry up and take out the blood medallion. The bald old man eased up slightly when he heard Jian Chen's words. They were outside the protective formation of the Radiant Saint Hall, so they were still in the Radiant Saint Hall's territory. He really did not want to attack disciples of the Radiant Saint Hall unless he had no choice. After all, the Radiant Saint Hall needed to be respected as a peak organization. Moreover, the chosen saint was present as well. It was quite fortunate for him that Jian Chen would cooperate. Jian Chen looked at Donglin Yanxue and said, "Your Highness, it's best if you return first." A gleam of light shone through Donglin Yanxue's eyes when she heard that. She seemed to understand what Jian Chen was trying to do. She glanced at him deeply and said, "Take care." The bald old man had no doubts. He continued to stand there leisurely, waiting for Jian Chen to take out the blood medallion. "Senior, please look carefully. What you want to check is right here." Jian Chen suddenly smiled strangely after Donglin Yanxue left. With that, a sword appeared in his hand. The bald old man immediately became slightly startled when he saw Jian Chen draw a sword and not the blood medallion. But afterwards, his eyes narrowed, and he became surprised. This was because he discovered the sword was actually a god artifact. Such a puny Radiant Saint Master actually has a god artifact. The bald old man was astonished, and at the same time, he felt that something was off from the bottom of his heart. As expected, as soon as the god artifact appeared, it shone with blinding light. 7 illusionary stars were conjured from the sword. It directly cleaved towards the bald old man under the illumination of starlight. The strike was astonishing. The 7 stars formed a single line, enveloping the bald old man like a galaxy. The 9-star sword of heavenly ways. It's the 9-star sword of heavenly ways. Why, you're Jian Chen. The bald old man's face changed drastically. Although he was an infinite prime, he was only an early infinite prime. He felt a great threat from Jian Chen's attack that was no weaker than a regular infinite prime strike. Jian Chen had struck out too suddenly, so the old man was caught completely off guard. The attack was extremely fast as well, so the old man had no time to dodge. The 9-star sword of heavenly ways arrived before the old man in a single instance. At this critical moment, tremendous energy surged out from the old man, immediately forming a barrier around him. At the same time, he became clad in armor. Boom! Time was too tight, so the old man could only put up something like this as a defense. Right after that, Jian Chen's 9-star sword of heavenly ways arrived. The strike directly cut through the barrier of energy around the old man. The 9-star sword of heavenly ways gave off the pressure of a god artifact and landed on the old man's armor as it shone brightly. Powerful energy exploded. The old man's armor was only a supreme quality saint artifact, so it was on a completely different level compared to the 9-star sword of heavenly ways. It was immediately shredded to pieces, and the old man was sent flying far away as well. A vicious gash appeared on his body, making blood rain down. "I've found Jian Chen. Jian Chen is here. Ancestor, Jian Chen is here." As he flew backwards, the old man immediately tried to communicate with his ancestor who was within the Radiant Saint Hall. However, his message was cut off by the sacred hall that stood above the clouds. It was unable to penetrate the structure. God damn it! The old man cursed angrily. He immediately took out a jade talisman to send his message through a secret technique. However, Jian Chen immediately took out a formation disc from his space ring and tossed it onto the ground after sending the old man flying. He stood on the formation disc and immediately activated it. The formation disc contained a teleportation formation. However, many disciples of the Radiant Saint Hall moved about in the surroundings. The moment they saw the 9-star sword of heavenly ways, they immediately recognized Jian Chen, and they all cried out. Even more of them directly used various methods of communication to contact their seniors. Intense white light had already surrounded Jian Chen as the powers of teleportation surged out. This was a long-distance teleportation formation. Although it could not cross regions, it could still send him extremely far away. It was the best method for him to escape from the Radiant Saint Hall. Otherwise, he would not be able to make it far away before the peak experts caught up to him given his current strength. This was the case even though he had grasped the laws of space. "Jian Chen, we've looked for you for so long, and we've finally found you. You've made us search so hard." At this moment, A heavy voice rang out from the radiant Saint Hall. With the voice, the energy in the surroundings churned wildly, condensing into a huge hand that reached towards Jian Chen with lightning speed. The hand condensed from energy contained the mysteries of laws and the truths of the world. As it reached over, all the laws in the area seemed to be affected as well. Jian Chen could clearly sense the space around him rapidly freeze up as he stood on the teleportation formation disc. The owner of the hand wanted to forcefully interfere with the teleportation of the disc. However, it was all too late. By the time space had completely frozen and the terrifying hand had arrived, Jian Chen had vanished from the formation disc. A black-robed middle-aged man stood in the air outside the sacred hall of the Radiant Saint Hall. He frowned as he stared in the direction that Jian Chen had vanished into. He murmured, "I was one step too slow. I actually let him escape. I failed to catch him this time. If I want to take him next time, I'll have to contend against the others. What a pity. Jian Chen has appeared. He really is hiding in the Radiant Saint Hall. However, since he has shown himself, he'll never escape again. I would like to see where he'll hide this time." At the same time, all the peak experts gathered in the Radiant Saint Hall appeared beside the black-robed middle-aged man. Delight filled their eyes as they expanded the senses of their souls rapidly. These people were all peak experts who stood at the apex of a plane. The senses of their souls were so powerful that they could envelope the entire desolate plane in a single instance. Before Jian Chen had exposed himself, the peak experts were indeed unable to see any flaws in his disguise from Mo Tianyun's mask. As a result, they were unable to realize his true identity. However, now that he had exposed himself, the peak experts had locked onto him. Even with Mo Tianyun's mask, he could no longer stay hidden. "I found him. He's in a city." Chapter 2354. Hunzong. However, in a single instance, the peak experts all found Jian Chen. Does he plan on leaving the desolate plain through a teleportation formation? The teleportation formations across the plain have been sealed up a long time ago. He's dreaming if he wants to flee through them. As they spoke, all the peak experts vanished from the Radiant Saint Hall. They pursued Jian Chen. The leader of the Radiant Saint Hall hovered before the sacred hall as the light in his eyes flickered. He hesitated. Clearly, he was rather tempted by the Anatta Tower on Jian Chen, along with the thought of obtaining it and handing it up to the First Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bishing. It was his only opportunity to develop ties with the Heavenly Palace of Bishing. However, as soon as he thought of Xianzhan, he could not help but hesitate. Just don't get involved. There are a lot of people who want the Anatta Tower. Even if you go, it's unlikely for you to obtain the Anatta Tower. At this moment, Xianzhan appeared. He stared at the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall deeply and said, "Moreover, things have happened with the Tower of Radiance. The mist inside is rapidly decreasing. The Tower of Radiance is enough for us. It is extremely likely for your son to be inside the Anatta Tower. Aren't you afraid that they'll harm your son after they obtain the Anatta Tower?" asked the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall. The Anatta Tower is a peak god artifact after all. Even if it's heavily damaged, it's still impervious. Unless they refine the Anatta Tower, they can't enter it. Xianzhan was not worried at all. He said with composure, "And as for refining the Anatta Tower, I don't think they're bold enough." "Oh no! Leader, something terrible has happened." At this moment, a panic-stricken voice rang out. An elder of the Radiant Saint Hall hurried over with several Radiant God Kings behind him. However, the Radiant God Kings seemed to be in a rather horrible shape. "Leader, I've just received news that the Grand Exalt's legacy within the Tower of Radiance appeared. The supreme cultivation method within the legacy imprint was obtained by Chongyang, and he's a member of the martial soul lineage," said the elder in a hurry. "What? The Grand Exalt's legacy appeared? The cultivation method actually fell into Jian Chen's hands?" The expression of leader of the Radiant Saint Hall changed drastically. Even Xianzhan's eyes narrowed as he became extremely shocked. The Tower of Radiance had a Grand Exalt's legacy. This had always been an ancient rumor that had yet to be proven in the Radiant Saint Hall. They had never thought it would suddenly appear now. The Grand Exalt's cultivation method is the greatest legacy of our Radiant Saint Hall. We can't let it fall into the hands of others. The leader of the Radiant Saint Hall became extremely stern. In the next moment, a terrifying presence radiated from him, and a white spear suddenly appeared. It concealed its glow, but it still possessed devastating power. The spear swept past the space there and directly ripped it open. The leader of the Radiant Saint Hall directly stepped into the ripped space and left. This time, Xian Zhan did not stop him. Nothing would have changed if Jian Chen had not obtained the Grand Exalt's legacy. But Xian Zhan could no longer find any reasons to help him now that he had taken away the supreme cultivation method. 100 million kilometers away from the Radiant Saint Hall in the central region of the desolate plain, a small building of only 3 stories tall sat within the noisy region of a bustling city. The building was one of the many buildings on the street. It was located close to the center of the city. The land prices there were astronomical. However, ever since the building was purchased by a mysterious person many years ago, it had just sat there idly. No one moved in. The building was empty. There were no decorations at all. There was only a formation disc several meters wide placed on the top floor, covered with profound inscriptions. At this moment, the formation suddenly flashed, and with a powerful pulse in space, a person in white light appeared. This person was Jian Chen. As soon as Jian Chen appeared, he leapt out the window and shot towards the center of the city like a bolt of lightning. He was extremely stern. After his soul had fused with chaotic force, his senses became unimaginably powerful. He could vaguely sense that the senses of several dozen souls had locked onto him. The owners of every single one of these senses was not someone he could stand up to. There was even an extremely obscure senses of the soul that Jian Chen could barely discover. It sent chills down his spine. He really is Jian Chen. He truly hid deep. Now, I can finally return to Master with what Master wants. At the same time, an old voice rang out from an estate within a distant city. Afterwards, the wooden door of a building within the depths of the estate opened up, and an old man in coarse clothes walked out. Senior 2. Immediately, a middle-aged man appeared silently. He immediately showed respect when he saw the old man. Let's go. Let's get Jian Chen and return to the heaven-splitting clan, the old man said indifferently as if he did not take the peak experts on the desolate plain seriously at all. With that, he vanished completely. The middle-aged man vanished as well, leaving the place as if he had teleported. Adriana, it's time for us to go as well, a benevolent old woman said to the woman in green beside her while she held a staff. At this moment, Jian Chen had already arrived at the very center of the city. This was the hub of the city, and the teleportation formations that could take people across planes happened to be located there as well. Jian Chen, the teleportation formation have already been sealed up. You can't leave. Hand over the Anata Tower, and I won't make things difficult for you. Jian Chen, give the Anata Tower to me. Our Daohuang Empire will protect you. Give me the Anata Tower, and I'll let you live. Otherwise die. At this moment, the space above Jian Chen twisted. Peak experts appeared one after another. They were scattered throughout the surroundings, remaining vigilant of one another as they surrounded Jian Chen. The sky above the city ripped open and endless light fell, illuminating the region. The leader of the Radiant Saint Hall had arrived as well. He looked at Jian Chen with mixed feelings and sighed gently. I don't care whether you're Chongyang or Jian Chen. But regardless, leave behind the cultivation method. That's the greatest legacy of our Radiant Saint Hall. We can't let others take it away, and we can't let people of the martial soul lineage take it away even more. The greatest legacy of the Radiant Saint Hall? Did that thing in the Tower of Radiance end up with Jian Chen instead of a disciple of your Radiant Saint Hall? At this moment, a mocking voice rang out. A middle-aged man with an appearance that was nothing special had silently arrived. He seemed just like an ordinary person. However, the appearance of the middle-aged man immediately caused the expression of the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall to change. He growled, Hunzong, you've actually come as well. The middle-aged man referred to as Hunzong chuckled and said, The 8th brother of our martial soul lineage has appeared. How can I not come for something so significant? Do you think you can change something with your arrival? This isn't your martial soul mountain. You can't act as you wish, the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall growled. Even if I can't change anything, I can keep your Radiant Saint Hall busy at the very least, so I can stop you from harming the 8th brother of our martial soul lineage, Hunzong chuckled. Then he glanced past all the peak experts present while remaining at ease and fearless. He clasped his fist and said, Everyone, Jian Chen is the 8th brother of our martial soul lineage. I hope you can do it for the sake of our martial soul lineage and not harm Jian Chen. We only want the Anata Tower. Get him to hand it over, and we won't make things difficult for him at all. Hunzong, your martial soul lineage can take your person, but you can't take away the Anata Tower. That's right. We can let Jian Chen go unscathed for the sake of your martial soul lineage. We can let you take him away. However, you must leave behind the Anata Tower. The peak experts gathered there all called out. They were determined. Even though Hun Zhang's cultivation was nothing special in their eyes, none of them dared to underestimate him. Instead, a number of the peak experts even revealed some fear. Surrounded, Jian Chen remained composed. He watched this scene coldly, and the light in his eyes flickered. From how these people treated Hunzong, he could already tell that even though the martial soul lineage could not give birth to grand primes, they were not as weak as he had imagined them to be. In particular, he discovered with his enhanced senses that although Hun Zhang's cultivation was the lowest out of the experts present, his threat level seemed to be even greater than the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall. Jian Chen, are you willing to give up the Anata Tower and return with me to the Martial Soul Mountain? That's the true home of our martial soul lineage, said Hunzong. He looked at Jian Chen cautiously, seeking his opinion. Leave behind what you obtained from the Tower of Radiance, or don't even think about leaving the desolate plain, said the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall firmly. He left no room for negotiation. The Grand Exalt's cultivation method was the greatest legacy within the Radiant Saint Hall. He could not afford to lose it. He would take it back regardless of the cost. Yu Chen, you're getting bolder and bolder. If I want to take Jian Chen away, do you think you can stop me? Let alone stop me. Who knows who'll emerge as the victor if we really start fighting? Hunzong mocked the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall. Try it. The leader of the Radiant Saint Hall's eyes turned cold as a powerful presence radiated from him. He did not back down at all. Senior Hunzong, you should go back. I obtained the Anata Tower in a lower world, and then I brought it up to the Saint's world. I will never just hand it over. Even if it'll be returned to the heavenly palace of Bixing, I'll return it personally, Jian Chen replied at this moment. He spoke very indifferently and calmly. The eyes of all the peak experts gathered there turned cold from that. Even Hunzong was surprised. He stared at Jian Chen deeply and only said after quite a pause, "Are you certain that you don't want to relinquish the Anata Tower?" "I will not," Jian Chen was determined. "Very well. I respect your choice." Hunzong nodded. As he said that, his eyes suddenly became pitch black. They were like two black holes that could devour all light. Extremely powerful martial soul force shot out from his eyes, piercing through space towards all the peak experts gathered there as invisible swords. Martial soul force was a wondrous and unique power formed from the combination of a fighter and Radiant Saint Master. It was extremely powerful and specifically targeted the soul. It was invisible, making it extremely difficult to sense. It would catch people off guard. The peak experts gathered there were vigilant of their surroundings at all times, remaining cautious of everyone there. However, no matter how cautious or vigilant they were, it was a waste of effort before the martial soul force. They were unable to defend against martial soul force. Even if they discovered it, they could only dodge beforehand. If they could not dodge it, they could only endure it. Martial soul force was invisible and could pierce all objects, let alone the protective energy around them. But even god artifacts of lower qualities were unable to stop Hunzang's powerful martial soul force. Immediately, all the peak experts nearby were affected. Under the influence of martial soul force, they became temporarily stunned. They were all very powerful. Their souls were like balls of roaring flames. With Hunzang's martial soul force scattered, it was very difficult for him to harm any one of them. However, stunning them for a split second was more than enough. Since you don't want to give up on the Anata Tower, we'll take the Anata Tower back to the Martial Soul Mountain with us. Jian Chen, you're very right. You obtained the Anata Tower in the lower world. Since it fell into your possession, it's your fortune. Why must you give it to someone else? Hunzong laughed aloud. He had already arrived beside Jian Chen, wanting to leave with him while everyone was stunned. When Hunzong took action, a tremendous imposing mountain that was seemingly capable of flattening the world appeared silently. It hovered in outer space strangely. The mountain was not physical. Instead, it was an illusionary shadow. It seemed like a projection. 6 figures sat on the illusionary mountain. They were all expressionless and emotionless, like monks meditating. They gave off presences of varying strength. Qing Shan happened to be among them. The illusionary mountain happened to be the martial soul mountain renowned throughout the saints' world. However, it was only a projection of the martial soul mountain. Jian Chen, for you, the entire martial soul lineage has come. Come with me to the martial soul mountain. As long as we arrive on the martial soul mountain, these people won't be able to do anything to you, Hunzong chuckled. He was fearless, as if he was not worried about offending so many peak experts at all. However, just when Hunzong wanted to take Jian Chen away, space suddenly ripped open. And a skinny hand reached out. With the truths of the world, it pressed towards Hunzong along a trajectory that obeyed the laws. Hunzong immediately became extremely stern. At that critical moment, his entire presence suddenly changed, as if it had established some sort of connection with the illusionary mountain in outer space. He also extended his hand, making it collide loudly with a skinny hand that reached out from the spatial crack. The collision was not as intense as one would have imagined. It all seemed calm. The two of them had purposefully withdrew their powers, or the storm of energy from their clash this time would have been enough to demolish the entire city. Hunzong suddenly quivered and retreated uncontrollably. At this moment, the illusionary mountain beyond the desolate plain quivered gently as well. The projection seemed to become even dimmer. Our heaven-splitting clan will be taking Jian Chen. No one else is allowed to take him away. As an old voice rang out, the spatial crack suddenly expanded, and an old man walked out. Chapter 2356. People from the God Clan. The peak experts affected by Hun Zhang's martial soul force had all recovered now. They did not bother about settling their debts with Hun Zong. Instead, all of them stared at the old man who had suddenly appeared with ugly expressions. Even if they ignored the old man's strength, the heaven-splitting clan he represented was enough to stifle everyone present. This was all because of their heaven-splitting ancestor. The heaven-splitting ancestor was one of the most powerful experts below Grand Exalt. The first majesty of the heavenly palace of Bishing stood at the same level. They were both figures revered by people in the saints' world. These peak experts had taken such drastic measures to search for the Anata Tower because they wanted to hand it over to the heavenly palace of Bishing. If they did that, they could establish ties with the heavenly palace of Bishing through the merit of their service. But at this moment, someone from the heaven-splitting clan had suddenly appeared. They wanted to take Jian Chen away, which was a horrible matter for all the peak experts gathered here. They could never afford to offend the heaven-splitting clan. Even Hun Zhang's heart sank when he heard the heaven-splitting clan. The leader of the Radiant Saint Hall also felt that this was a horrible matter. Jian Chen possessed the Grand Exalt's cultivation method. He could not allow the cultivation method to end up in the hands of the martial soul lineage, but he felt powerless now that the heaven-splitting clan had thrown their hat into the ring. "Does your heaven-splitting clan want the Anata Tower as well?" asked a peak expert regretfully with a frown. They had gone to extremely great lengths to find Jian Chen. They had searched through the entire desolate plain time and time again. Now that they finally found him, someone from the heaven-splitting clan suddenly appeared, wanting to take Jian Chen away. Would that not mean all their efforts during those years would be for nothing, and they were taken advantage of in the end? This made all of them resentful. The old man snorted coldly. He said in complete disdain, "It's only a damaged god artifact. Why would it catch the eye of our heaven-splitting clan? I've only come under Master's orders to take Jian Chen away. You can fight over that tower as much as you like." Everyone became relieved from that. At the same time, they felt shocked. All of them looked at Jian Chen with mixed feelings. Naturally, they knew who the master the old man was referring to. Aside from the legendary heaven-splitting ancestor, who else had the right to make such a powerful expert refer to them as master? Jian Chen was only a god king, yet he could raise the attention of the heaven-splitting ancestor, and even make him personally give orders to send an expert over to protect him. It did not matter what intentions the heaven-splitting ancestor had for protecting Jian Chen. What was certain was that once this news made it out, all the people who wanted to lay their hands on Jian Chen would need to carefully consider the consequences. "Jian Chen, give the Anata Tower to them, and then come back to the heaven-splitting clan with me. If you can get the support of my master, there will be no need for you to go to such great lengths to establish ties with the heavenly palace of Bishing," the old man from the heaven-splitting clan said to Jian Chen. Jian Chen remained expressionless. He asked sternly, "Junior is very confused. Junior has nothing to do with the Heaven-Splitting clan, and Junior doesn't know the Heaven-Splitting ancestor either. May I ask just why the Heaven-Splitting ancestor wants me? You will naturally find out once you arrive at the Heaven-Splitting clan, replied the old man from the Heaven-Splitting clan. Humph. Unless the Heaven-Splitting ancestor comes personally, don't you even think about taking Jian Chen away. At this moment, Hun Zong called out. Suddenly, he began to shine with blinding light, and he seemed to become one with the martial soul mountain in outer space. Their powers completely fused together. It was not just that. The 6 figures seated on the martial soul mountain also shone like Hun Zong. Their vital energies and all their powers seemed to combine together in that instance before fusing with Hun Zong through the illusionary martial soul mountain. As a result, not only did Hun Zong fuse with the power from the martial soul mountain, but even the 6 other members of the martial soul lineage had completely fused their powers with Hun Zong through a special method. Immediately, Hun Zhang's presence became extremely terrifying. All the peak experts gathered nearby frowned. They became afraid. The legendary martial soul array of the martial soul lineage really is worthy of its name. However, this isn't the martial soul mountain, so the amount of power you can borrow from the martial soul mountain is extremely limited. A mere projection of the martial soul mountain is not enough for you to do whatever you want, said the old man from the Heaven-Splitting clan coldly. He immediately used a palm strike. His hand seemed to fuse with the surroundings and the laws, crushing down on Hun Zong with the supreme mysteries of the world. But at this moment, a staff appeared out of nowhere. It gently struck the old man's hand. Immediately, a devastating might erupted. It directly ripped through space and created a fist-sized black hole. It devoured everything in the surroundings, sucking away all the energy there. The old man from the Heaven-Splitting clan remained the same as before after the strike, but the staff that had appeared out of nowhere dimmed. An old woman appeared silently, and the staff returned to her hands. I was already expecting the God clan to send people over, but I never thought it would actually be you. It looks like that young leader of your God clan really does place great importance on Jian Chen, actually sending a hall elder. The old man from the Heaven-Splitting clan looked at the old woman calmly. What? A hall elder of the God clan? The expressions of all the experts gathered there changed after learning the old woman's identity and background. In the past, the God clan was known as the greatest clan in the Saints' world. They were the undisputed most powerful organization. However, ever since the war god passed away, they had declined and lost that title. However, even with that being the case, the God clan was still among the handful of peak organizations in the Saints' world. Their heritage was extremely deep. Very few people dared to provoke them. Tu-san, since you know Jian Chen is someone that our war god holds dearly, you should also understand that you won't be able to take Jian Chen away, said the hall elder Tyne. She knew what kind of person the Heaven-Splitting ancestor was and knew even better that he definitely had some sort of unknown motive for taking Jian Chen away. As a result, she could not allow Jian Chen to be taken away by the people of the Heaven-Splitting clan. Tu-san shook his head, and a sliver of disdain flashed through his eyes. He said, the current God clan is no longer the God clan of the past. Before your little war god truly matures, you have no right to speak to our Heaven-Splitting clan like that. Moreover, unless a great elder of your God clan comes personally, you hall elders aren't my opponent. Tyne's eyes turned cold when she heard that. She said slowly, I never thought that a clan so insignificant that they were unworthy of our God clan's attention would try to dominate our God clan today. Tu-san, since you're so confident, I would like to see whether you can defeat me, an early Grand Prime, with your strength as a mid-Grand Prime. With that, Tyne pointed her staff at Tu-san. Immediately, a dense, green light enveloped him. In the next moment, the two of them vanished. Hun Zong, take Jian Chen back to the Martial Soul Mountain as soon as possible. Don't let the people of the Heaven-Splitting clan get a hold of him. The Heaven-Splitting ancestor isn't someone who would be up to any good. When Tyne vanished, her voice rang out in Hun Zhang's head. Chapter 2357. A dangerous situation. Hun Zhang's heart immediately sank when he received the hall elder's message. He became even more determined to stop the Heaven-Splitting clan from taking Jian Chen away. Hun Zong has already used the Martial Soul Array. He possesses the powers of the Martial Soul Mountain and 6 other people. Coupled with the strangeness of Martial Soul Force, it'll be difficult for us to take him on alone. Quick, let's work together to keep Hun Zong busy. We can't let Jian Chen approach the martial soul mountain before he hands over the Anata Tower. Since Jian Chen is unwilling to hand over the Anata Tower, let's take it ourselves. Everyone, if you want the Anata Tower, we need to cooperate. Let's get the Anata Tower first. We can talk about how we split it some other day. At the same time, the peak experts gathered there spoke out. They understood just how deep the heritage of the martial soul lineage ran. Even though they could never become Grand Primes, no peak organization on the Saints' world dared to underestimate the martial soul lineage. This was all because of the martial soul mountain's existence. They knew extremely well that once Jian Chen returned to the martial soul mountain, there would truly be nothing that they could do. This is the territory of my Dao Huang Empire, so leave the Anata Tower to me. You only need to keep Han Zong busy. We can discuss who the Anata Tower belongs to after we get it. The ancestral emperor of the Dao Huang Empire spoke out at this moment. He gave off the bearing of a ruler and was serious both in speech and manner. He seemed like he could not be defied. He directly took action. His hand shattered space, arriving before Jian Chen in a single instance as if distance was an arbitrary concept. Jian Chen, I don't want to harm you. I will only take your Anata Tower. Do not make an ignorant decision, the ancestral emperor said. The martial soul lineage and the god clan stood behind Jian Chen, so he was clearly slightly worried about Jian Chen's identity. However, this worry was evidently not enough to stop him from trying to take the Anata Tower. Don't you dare! Han Zong called out. Using the fusion of powers, he struck out decisively, stopping the ancestral emperor of the Dao Huang Empire. At the same time, his eyes immediately turned pitch black, like a black hole that swallowed all light. Powerful martial soul force shot out like invisible swords once again, targeting the peak experts in the surroundings. Be careful, one of the peak experts called out, but it was still useless. Even though they could sense Han Zhang's attack, there was nothing they could do to defend against it. The invisible swords of martial soul force possessed a wondrous power that could shake up the soul. It pierced through their defenses and struck their souls. Immediately, all of them tremored, and their eyes became momentarily lost. At the same time they paused. Even the ancestral emperor of the Dao Huang Empire was not an exception. However, Han Zong did not target these people any longer. Taking Jian Chen with him was the priority. He grabbed Jian Chen's shoulder and was about to leave. Boom! At this moment, a deafening boom exploded in the sky. A colossal, azure pung appeared beyond the desolate plain. Its wings were unfurled, blotting out the sun. It struck the projection of the martial soul mountain heavily. The projection immediately shook violently. It constantly twisted and distorted in shape as it rapidly dimmed. It was the Azure Pung King. He had taken action as well to stop the people of the martial soul lineage from taking Jian Chen away. Due to the celestial sword saint's existence, he did not dare to set foot on the desolate plain. However, the projection of the martial soul mountain was unable to descend onto the desolate plain either. It could only appear in outer space. As a result, the martial soul mountain became the perfect target for the Azure Pung King. With the martial soul mountain under attack, Han Zong seemed to be heavily affected. His body trembled as his face became flushed. The power from the martial soul mountain had almost been severed from him. The heavenly king of azure brilliance was a peak expert who had reached mid-grand prime. Moreover, the noble powerful blood of a divine beast flowed through his veins. Not only was his speed almost unmatched, but even his battle prowess could be described as impressive. A strike from him possessed extraordinary power. Heavenly King of Azure Brilliance, our martial soul lineage has never done anything to you. What are you trying to do? Han Zong called out. Jian Chen must die. Even if the God Clan is protecting him, I will never leave him alive. The Azure Pung King's icy voice rang out loudly from outer space, brimming with killing intent. He was the only person who truly wanted to kill Jian Chen among the peak experts. Han Zhang's face became ugly. The Azure Pung King's original form was a great Pung. He had a vicious personality and was known for clinging to his grudges in the Saints' world. He was not an easy person to deal with. Since he had said something like that, he really did want to kill Jian Chen. However, he did indeed possess the strength and right to be fearless of the God Clan. The war god of the God Clan had yet to mature completely. With his terrifying speed, no one in the God Clan could make him stay. That even included the three great elders. Han Zong, you won't be able to take away Jian Chen as long as the Anata Tower remains with him. The peak experts affected by Hun Zhang's martial soul force had all recovered. They all struck out to keep Hun Zhang busy. Booms constantly rang out in outer space. The Azure Peng King launched consecutive attacks, where every single one of them was devastating, causing space to crack. The projection of the Martial Soul Mountain tottered under his attacks. It already showed signs of collapse. The Martial Soul Array had been forcefully cut off as well, unable to support Hun Zhang any longer. After all, this was only a projection of the Martial Soul Mountain. It only contained a portion of the Martial Soul Mountain's power. It was not the true Martial Soul Mountain. Without the support of the Martial Soul Array, Hun Zhang immediately lost the upper hand as he faced so many peak experts who were more powerful than him. The protective formation of the Dao Huang Empire had already been activated. All of its power gathered outside the city, locking in the shockwaves and preventing them from spreading out. At the same time, the tremendous population of the city was all moved away by the power of the formation. The situation is bad. Chu Jian, let's go help out Hun Zhang. Aside from Hun Zhang, there's only me and you out of the 6 of us who can stand up to those people. The 6 figures on the mountain projection did their best to stabilize the Martial Soul Mountain. One of the middle-aged men looked at the desolate plain and said sternly, "We can't. We have to stabilize the mountain projection. We can't let it collapse from the attacks of the Heavenly King of Azure Brilliance, or we won't be able to cross this huge distance and return to the Martial Soul Mountain through the Martial Soul Mountain's power," said Chu Jian sternly. On the desolate plain, the Ancestral Emperor took action again. He reached out towards Jian Chen, locking down an entire region. Jian Chen's eyes turned cold. With a thought, the damaged Anata Tower shot out from between his eyes. The power of laws that compressed the limits seemed to have condensed on the Anata Tower. It was able to crush everything. Hence, as soon as the Anata Tower appeared, the frozen space was instantly freed. Jian Chen clutched the Anata Tower and activated as much of its power as he could, sending it towards the Ancestral Emperor. The Anata Tower. The Ancestral Emperor's eyes lit up. He stared at the Anata Tower with shining eyes, and his hand that originally reached towards Jian Chen moved towards the Anata Tower instead. Terrifying power condensed on his hand. It seemed to be able to collapse space. He had put on the strongest defense. However, the power of the Anata Tower was just terrifying. Even though Jian Chen could not unleash any of its power as a peak god artifact, its weight alone was shocking. Having been careless, the Ancestral Emperor was directly knocked hundreds of meters away by the force of the Anata Tower. It really is a god artifact of the very peak. The Ancestral Emperor's eyes shone with interest. He had only been knocked away, not injured, because even though Jian Chen had refined 5 floors of the Anata Tower, he was still unable to harm a Grand Prime through the Anata Tower alone. Immediately, the Ancestral Emperor took action again. This time he was prepared. He did not collide with the Anata Tower directly. Instead, he used a gentle force to wrap around the Anata Tower. Chapter 2358. Attempting the Path of Swords. Jian Chen was cold. He knew that he had caught his opponent off guard the first time, so he had managed to knock him away while he was still ignorant of the Anata Tower's force. However, he definitely could not use the same method twice. It was extremely likely for the Anata Tower to be taken away. Jian Chen pulled back the Anata Tower, clutching it in his hand as he rapidly retreated. The hand condensed from terrifying energy reached over with a supreme pressure. Wherever it passed by, space froze up and the laws paused. It moved towards Jian Chen with great speed such that he was unable to condense his laws of the sword. All the laws he grasped were affected, and he was unable to use them like normal. The Ancestral Emperor's attack could affect space and interfere with the operation of the laws. This was how terrifying a Grand Prime was. Even though they were nowhere close to Grand Exalts, who had basically become a part of the laws, they had still comprehended the laws to an extremely deep level as Grand Primes. They could use a part of their powers. As a result, when the Ancestral Emperor of the Dao Huang Empire struck out, Jian Chen felt like he was facing the world, as if what targeted him was the world he currently resided in. Even all of his laws had been restrained. However, Jian Chen did not become flustered at all. With a thought, he used the power of the Anata Tower. Immediately, it destroyed Jian Chen's restraints and enveloped him. Jian Chen isolated himself from the world with the power of the Anata Tower, allowing him to become immune to the restraints. With a flash, he retreated to several hundred meters away, arriving in the central square of the bustling city. Currently, the central square had been reduced to a mess. All the structures had collapsed into ruins. The entire place had basically been flattened by the shockwaves from the battle. The protective formation of the Daohuang Empire did not protect this city. Instead, it gathered a certain range away from the city, locking the place up to prevent the shockwaves from spreading out and causing even greater damage. Too many peak experts had gathered here. As a result, even the protective formation for the entire empire was unable to block all of it. If something happened to the formation, they would lose something even more important than what they were trying to protect. However, two places remained unaffected in the ruined square. The first place was the teleportation formation across plains. This was one of the most valuable properties of the Daohuang Empire, and it had been rather difficult to construct. As a result, it received the most protection. The other place was a flight of stairs constructed from sword chi. This was the path of swords constructed by the greatest expert of the desolate plain, the celestial sword saint. It was also unscathed. All the shockwaves seemed to be cut in half by an invisible sword when they approached the path of swords, redirected into two streams. Jian Chen had already arrived beside the path of swords. He glanced at the peak experts gathered in the surroundings before looking at the colossal bird that blotted out the sky. Determination appeared in his eyes, and he set foot on the path of swords boldly. Immediately, Jian Chen became wrapped up by powerful sword chi. He was already standing on the first step of the path of swords. The face of the ancestral emperor changed. He immediately stopped, staring at Jian Chen from 100 meters away. He was expressionless. The path of swords had been laid down by the celestial sword saint to find a successor. It was rumored that if someone made it to the end of the path of swords, they would have the opportunity to become the celestial sword saint's disciple. Once someone set foot on the path of swords, the test laid down by the celestial sword saint would formally begin. The ancestral emperor of the Daohuang Empire did not dare to continue his attacks. Jian Chen has actually made it onto the path of swords. Oh no! Jian Chen focuses on cultivating the way of the sword, and his talent is rather extraordinary. If he passes the celestial sword saint's test and becomes his disciple, we won't have any opportunities left. The peak experts who were keeping Han Zong busy paid attention to Jian Chen's situation at all times. Now, they all cried out with ugly expressions. Some of them even blamed the ancestral emperor. Don't worry. He can't pass the celestial sword saint's test. Do you know how strict the celestial sword saint is with his selection? How can he pass the test personally set down by the celestial sword saint so easily? Said a peak expert. At this moment, there was a flash, and the hall elder of the god clan Tyne, as well as the old man from the heaven-splitting clan, Tu San, returned. They were both in a rather messy shape. No one knew the result of their battle. He is actually attempting the path of swords. Tyne stared at the hazy figure surrounded by sword chi on the path of swords and frowned. Then she muttered, though that might be the best choice right now. However, Tu San's face was sunken. He glared at Tyne and said coldly, Your god clan has gotten in the way of an important matter of my master. You've made my master wait even longer. Your god clan better consider the consequences of offending my master. Tyne's eyes turned cold and she replied icily, If your heaven-splitting clan has the ability, come find our god clan on the Godnigma plane. Humph. Master is only a step away from that level of cultivation. Once my master breaks through, I would like to see how your god clan plans on continue acting arrogantly. Tu San snorted coldly, as if he disdained Tyne's words. At this moment, the battle between Han Zong and the peak experts stopped as well as Jian Chen set foot on the path of sword. He glanced at Jian Chen before looking at outer space. His gaze was extremely shocking. Heavenly King of Azure Brilliance. Suddenly, Han Zong bellowed out furiously, and he suddenly vanished. When he appeared again, he was on the Martial Soul Mountain. Martial Soul Array. Han Zong bellowed out and fell into formation with the 6 other people on the Martial Soul Mountain again. Their powers were poured together once more, completely merging with the power from the Martial Soul Mountain. Powerful Martial Soul Force swept out like a shocking wave towards the Azure Pung King. The Martial Soul Force came from the 7 of them. It was no longer scattered. Instead, it was concentrated on a single point. It was extremely terrifying. The Azure Pung King, who had been constantly attacking the Martial Soul Mountain, showed some fear. With a flash, He retreated to billions of kilometers away, avoiding the range of the Martial Soul Mountain's attack. Han Zong and the 6 others stood with sunken faces on the Martial Soul Mountain. The Azure Pung King was just too fast. Their attacks with Martial Soul Force could not land, so there was nothing that they could do about him. Jian Chen must die. None of you can protect him. If your Martial Soul lineage dares to help Jian Chen again, I'll kill you all as well. Unless you stay on the Martial Soul Mountain for your entire lives like cowards, you won't be able to avoid being hunted down, the Azure Pung King said coldly with sharp killing intent. Afterwards, the Azure Pung King looked at the desolate plain, at Jian Chen who had already stepped onto the path of swords. A cold intent appeared in his eyes, and in the next moment, he plucked one of his azure feathers and threw it. Like a bolt of lightning, the feather shot towards the desolate plain with great speed. It crossed a huge distance in a single instance, arriving above the path of swords and shooting towards Jian Chen with devastating power. Chapter 2359, The Bearing of Sword Immortal, 1. The Heavenly King of Azure Brilliance has actually attacked the Path of Swords. The Path of Swords was constructed by the Celestial Sword Saint. How bold of the Heavenly King of Azure Brilliance. He really is the Heavenly King of Azure Brilliance after all. There's really only a few people who dare to disrespect the Celestial Sword Saint, and he just happens to be one of them. The peak experts around the Path of Sword all cried out. The Heavenly King of Azure Brilliance was undeterred by the Celestial Sword Saint and had launched an attack at Jian Chen after he set foot on the Path of Swords. They would never possess such courage. The Heavenly King of Azure Brilliance's feather had arrived above the Path of Swords with pulsing, destructive energy by now. The strike was extremely astonishing. If the feather landed, not only would Jian Chen be done for, but even the Path of Swords might be destroyed. Jian Chen's face changed as he stood on the Path of Swords. He controlled the Anata Tower with all his efforts, wanting to hide in it as soon as possible. This was a sure kill strike from the Azure Pung King. If it made contact, it would be very difficult for him to survive with his current strength. However, the Azure Feather was just too quick. The concept of distance was negligible before it, and it arrived in a single instance. It was so fast that Jian Chen did not even have the opportunity to enter the Anata Tower. Jian Chen's heart sank. At this moment, he felt the threat of death. Blue Bird Brain, how bold of you! At this moment, an ancient voice rang out grandly. The terrifying sound waves could pierce through anything, causing space to shake as even the laws of the world seemed to be affected. The space around the Path of Swords suddenly twisted. The laws operating in that region were seemingly distorted. The Azure Pung King's feather immediately slowed down when it entered the twisted space. In the next moment, the Path of Swords that was completely condensed from sword chi suddenly shone with blinding light. A resplendent strand of sword chi shot out from the Path of Swords into the air. The sword chi was like a blinding streak of light, tearing through the air with enough brightness to make everything else pale in comparison. As soon as the Heavenly King of Azure Brilliance's feather came in contact with the sword chi, it disintegrated. The feather that was supposed to contain devastating power seemed fragile. The sword chi continued onwards without weakening at all, tearing its way to outer space. Terrifying sword intent had already locked onto the Heavenly King of Azure Brilliance. The Heavenly King of Azure Brilliance's face changed slightly, and deep fear appeared in his eyes. His body that was as colossal as a planet shrunk to 10 meters wide in a single instance. He had become a tiny Azure Pung. However, slashes appeared on the Azure Peng's body. The slashes either cut through his flesh, making him bleed, or swept past his tough feathers, leaving behind white marks. This was the result of getting locked onto by the sword chi, caused by the terrifying sword intent. The Celestial Sword Saint was just too powerful. Before the sword chi had even arrived, the sword intent had already affected the space there, turning the region around the Azure Pung King into a boundary of sword chi. All the laws and all the powers within the boundary of sword chi were under the Celestial Sword Saint's control. It all turned into sharp swords. Celestial Sword Saint. The Azure Pung King bellowed out in resentment, but he did not dare to stay where he was. With a flash of azure light, he vanished in a single instance, fleeing to the depths of space with terrifying speed. However, as he left, the terrifying sword chi that had shot over from the Path of Swords passed through the azure light that the Heavenly King of Azure Brilliance had turned into. Immediately, blood sprayed out. The Heavenly King of Azure Brilliance has fled. However, he's injured, said the ancestral emperor of the Daohuang Empire sternly as he stared at outer space. One of his wings had almost been cut off. The celestial sword saint is so strong. His cultivation level is high enough, but his battle prowess exceeds his current level of cultivation as well. The hall elder of the god clan, Tyne, looked towards the path of swords in admiration. Tu San from the heaven-splitting clan remained silent. At that moment, he had also discovered that the celestial sword saint's strength was much greater than the rumored. At the very least, he felt that the sword Qi the heavenly king of azure brilliance faced was life-threatening. He knew that if the person who faced the sword Qi was someone other than the heavenly king of azure brilliance at the same level of cultivation, it would have been impossible for them to escape. Only the heavenly king of azure brilliance could escape with his almost unmatched speed. The foreign peak experts around the path of swords all became fearful. They could not help but distance themselves further from the path of swords as they felt great danger. As peak experts, they could sense just how terrifying the previous sword Qi was to an even greater degree. The bottom of their hearts shivered when they saw the astonishing sword Qi, and it was to the point where chills even ran down the spines of many. Jian Chen lost the ability to observe the outside world after the sword Qi was launched. All of his senses had been cut off by a powerful sword intent. Now, he had entered a hazy white world. Apart from the flight of stairs that led into the sky, there was nothing else present. White was the only color in this world. This is a world of the way of the sword. Jian Chen sensed his surroundings with his mind and immediately understood the secrets here. The world had been conjured from the way of the sword. The steps beneath him were compressed from the laws of the sword, and every single step of the stairs that led upwards represented a portion of the laws of the sword. Jian Chen sucked in a deep breath. He knew that the test from the celestial sword saint had formally begun. He began to ascend the stairs slowly. He made his way up with confident steps. Once he reached the end, he would have the opportunity of accepting the celestial sword saint as his master. He did not want to become the celestial sword saint's disciple. If he could, he would distance himself from the celestial sword saint. After all, the celestial sword saint was the greatest expert on the desolate plain, possessing unfathomable strength. If he spent long periods of time with someone like that, he was worried that the celestial sword saint would still find some problems with him despite Emo Tianyun's mask. After all, he possessed the twin swords. However, he had no other choice now. Jian Chen ascended the steps without stopping. The test of the way of the sword hidden within each step gradually became more difficult. Where he was right now was the simplest part of the tests, so there was no need for him to stop at all with his current cultivation level. This was because Jian Chen would easily pass through the tests the moment they appeared from the steps. Very soon, Jian Chen completed a third of the path, and at this moment, the tests he faced became greater and greater. He began to slow down. Chapter 2360. The Bearing of Sword Immortal, 2. At this moment, the tests from the Path of Swords became stricter and stricter. Consequently, Jian Chen was forced to stop for a while with his eyes closed to comprehend them. In the ruins of the city, the Hall Elder of the God Clan, Tu San from the Heaven-Splitting Clan, and the peak experts from various places all stood below the Path of Swords and watched Jian Chen climb upwards. Jian Chen was unable to see anything outside while he undertook the tests from the Path of Swords. All of his senses were restricted within the Path of Swords, but the peak experts could see him clearly. Under their watch, Jian Chen basically seemed unstoppable. He completed a third of the distance without slowing down at all, making many of the present peak experts nervous. More than 90% of them did not wish for Jian Chen to pass the test of the Path of Swords. If Jian Chen made it to the end and became the disciple of the Celestial Sword Saint, they would not be able to do anything to him under the Celestial Sword Saint's protection. It's just a pity that outsiders can't interfere with the tests laid down by the Celestial Sword Saint. Otherwise, at that moment, many of the peak experts sighed inside. If the situation allowed it, they would use various methods to make Jian Chen fall down. However, the fate of the Heavenly King of Azure Brilliance and the Celestial Sword Saints might have drained all their courage. He has clearly slowed down. Don't worry, he can't pass through the Celestial Sword Saint's tests. The Celestial Sword Saint's Path of Swords has already stood for several 100,000 years. Countless prodigies have attempted it in hopes of becoming the Celestial Sword Saint's disciple, but in the end, none of them passed. Jian Chen will definitely become one of the numerous people who failed. Elder, do you think Jian Chen can pass through the Celestial Sword Saint's tests? Adriana looked at Jian Chen on the path of swords and asked in concern from beside Tyne. It's very difficult to say. Although Jian Chen's talent can be described as unprecedented, the Celestial Sword Saint's tests can't just be described as simply as almost impossible. Not only do they test talent and wit, but they also test a person's temperament. If the Celestial Sword Saint is unsatisfied with their temperament, they can't become the Celestial Sword Saint's disciple no matter how great their talent is, said Tyne of the God Clan slowly. Her old eyes stared right at Jian Chen, and she continued, as a result, not only is there a need for extremely great talent for the way of the sword, but the Celestial Sword Saint must also find you appeasing in order for you to become his disciple. The Celestial Sword Saint is a loner. He never takes anyone seriously, nor does he make contact with other experts of the Saint's world. His temperament is very strange, so it's difficult to appease him. On the other side, Tu San, who stood before Tyne, stared at Jian Chen with squinted eyes. He sneered inside, Jian Chen, do you think you've changed something by setting foot on the path of swords? The Celestial Sword Saint is very powerful, but no matter how powerful he is, he's nothing in my master's eyes. Tu San was very confident. After all, his master, the heaven-splitting ancestor, was one of the greatest experts below Grand Exalt. He stood at the same level as the First Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bishing, and was only a single step away from becoming a Grand Exalt. A person like that indeed had the right to look down on almost everyone in the Saint's world. At this moment, Jian Chen had arrived high in the sky. He had completed half of the path of swords that plunged into the clouds. What is the sword? Suddenly, a tremendous voice rang out in the hazy white world that Jian Chen was in. It boomed like a great bell, shaking up Jian Chen's mind. The sword is a will, a spirit. Jian Chen closed his eyes and opened his mind. He explained his understanding of the way of the sword through his comprehensions of its essence, its spirit. What is the way of the sword? The booming voice rang out again. The way of the sword is a law. The way of the sword is the world. The tests became tougher and tougher on the path of swords. Gradually, it approached the very essence of the way of the sword, the core of the 3,000 ways in the world. The resistance that Jian Chen encountered became greater and greater as well, such that the amount of time it took for him to take each step multiplied. In the blink of an eye, a month had already passed since Jian Chen set foot on the path of swords. During that month, Jian Chen had completed 3/4 of the path of swords. He only had a quarter of the distance remaining before he could reach the end. Nothing too drastic happened during this month. However, the number of peak experts gathered on the desolate plain did increase. These people had hurried over from various places across the Saint's world with various intentions after learning that Jian Chen had been exposed. Naturally, some people wanted to try and benefit from the situation. After all, when Jian Chen was hidden on the desolate plain before, no one knew where he was hiding. It was extremely difficult to find him, so there were obviously many peak experts who were unwilling to take part in something so arduous. However, now that Jian Chen had been fully exposed and had been forced onto the path of swords, these people finally found their opportunity. None of them believed Jian Chen would really pass the Celestial Sword Saint's test, as they had already learned about the details of the tests from those who had attempted it in the past. They were confident that he could not complete it. All of the peak experts had already departed from around the path of swords. Of course, they did not truly leave. Instead, they hid in the distance, paying close attention to the situation there. With their cultivation levels, they would be able to capture the slightest disturbances. They could also travel a huge distance in a split second. Jian Chen managed to benefit from the month of tests on the path of swords. As he rapidly advanced through the tests, he tested and verified his comprehensions of the way of the sword with the mysteries within the tests. He found many areas he was lacking in, allowing him to deepen his comprehension of the way of the sword even more. I'm at the great perfection of sword spirit right now. My next realm is sword immortal. The great perfection of sword spirit is equivalent to a late God King's comprehension of laws, while sword immortal is equivalent to the primordial realm. Jian Chen sat there as the light from the laws of the sword enveloped him. Countless strands of sword qi revolved around him. The sword qi was sharp, but every single strand seemed to possess a hint of intelligence, as if they had a spirit. This was a sign of sword spirit. However, at this moment, the sword qi around him gained a sense of elegance, a sense of liberation, as if they had become unbound from the word. At sword spirit, the sword qi is about the word spirit. They're intelligent, as if they have a spirit of their own. Sword immortal is about the word immortal. They must possess an immortal bearing. Immortals are liberated. They're untainted, unshackled from the world and free, Jian Chen murmured. In that moment, he seemed to gain an immortal bearing. He had already understood the true essence of sword immortal. He had touched upon its boundary, but he did not cross it just yet. However, since he had seen it, since he had found the path, truly crossing over was only a matter of time now. He basically had a foot planted in the sword immortal realm now. Jian Chen slowly opened his eyes. He stood up from the ground, and after gathering his concentration, he continued onwards to a higher step. However, he now possessed a sense of natural elegance, an immortal bearing. His every action seemed to abide by some kind of supreme mystery in the laws of the world. This was a transformation in presence from having a foot planted in the sword immortal realm. Jian Chen was still unable to control it completely, struggling to maintain a state where he had returned to the basics, so he always demonstrated it accidentally. As a result, he seemed very extraordinary. Afterwards, Jian Chen continued to climb the path of swords, making it further and further up. Now, he approached the top of the path of swords. He was getting closer and closer to completing the tests. However, at the same time, the resistance Jian Chen encountered became greater and greater, taking up more and more time. The final segment of the path did not test simple things like a person's talent for the way of the sword and affinity for comprehension. It also included battle experience, the ability to counterattack in dire situations, and even his temperament. Jian Chen had gone through countless battles where his life was on the line from the Tian Yuan continent to the Saints' world, so his battle experience was extremely rich. However, it was still extremely difficult for him to make it through the various tests the Celestial Sword Saint had set down. Jian Chen, it has been so many years. I've finally found you. When Jian Chen set foot on the next step, the landscape around him suddenly changed. He had arrived in a world of natural beauty. A great beauty stood before him. Her beauty seemed to gather all the color in the world, making the surroundings pale in comparison. She was Shangguan Mu'er. Mu'er? Jian Chen was surprised. He looked at the beauty in a daze as the softest, weakest heartstring seemed to be tugged firmly. Jian Chen, you've roamed the saints' world for the sake of greater strength such that we're almost always separated. You even have to bear the potential pain of becoming separated forever. Jian Chen, just give up on the pursuit of strength. Give up on the way of the sword. We can step away from the world and live a peaceful life. How good would that be? Tears flowed down Shangguan Mu'er's eyes as she looked at him hopefully. Her pitiful look could melt even the toughest hearts. It was very difficult for anyone to turn her down. Jian Chen's mind immediately shook. His will wavered. In that instance, he was almost tempted to agree to Shangguan Mu'er's request, giving up on his pursuit of strength to retire and settle down for a peaceful life with Shangguan Mu'er. Peace isn't that easy to achieve. Jian Chen shook his head. In this world, the strong have always preyed on the weak. Strength is the only thing you can rely on to survive. Without enough strength, living a life of peace is merely wishful thinking. I won't give up on the way of the sword, nor will I give up on the pursuit of strength, as that is what I rely on to survive, Jian Chen said firmly. With that, the scene before him shattered. Shangguan Mu'er vanished and so did that wonderful world. He had returned to the white, hazy path of swords. Jian Chen sucked in a deep breath. Determination flooded his eyes, and he took a step forwards boldly, climbing up to the next step. Afterwards, Jian Chen experienced illusion after illusion. Without any exception, the illusions showed the people he was the closest with. All of them either betrayed Jian Chen, or they were slain in front of him. It was mental torture through various means. These illusions all touched the softest spots in Jian Chen's hearts. It was his Achilles' heel, so he endured unimaginable mental torture as he went through these tests of illusions. His mind had almost collapsed. The illusions were just too realistic. It was impossible to tell the real from the fake for those who became submerged in them, so Jian Chen was heavily affected. There were several times that he became confused. Inner demons. These are all my inner demons. Jian Chen shut his eyes and felt powerless. Inner demons were the demons of the mind. They refer to the emotions and desires of a person, the weakest embodiment of a person's mind. Jian Chen was no enlightened saint. He had his emotions and desires as well. He had his feelings. All of this would give birth to inner demons. The last tests of the Path of Swords are truly brutal. They've triggered the demons in the depths of my heart. If my mind wasn't determined enough, it would have collapsed long ago, and I would have been driven to insanity, thought Jian Chen. Cold sweat gradually appeared on his forehead. However, in the next moment, his gaze became determined. He thought, these are all tests that I must go through along the path to becoming strong. Since I want to reach a higher level of cultivation, I can't be defeated by my inner demons. My family and friends are indeed my soft side. But that's all because I'm not powerful enough to protect them. However, when I become a grand exalt one day and stand as the sovereign at the very apex of the world, will there still be anyone who dares to threaten me with my friends and family? Once these restraints are gone, the demons in my heart will collapse on their own. Very soon, Jian Chen became determined, and he continued to climb upwards. When he reached the next step, the landscape around him changed again. He was brought to a battlefield in outer space. It was a war between the saints' world and the immortals' world. Outer space was packed with people. Jian Chen happened to be standing with Tai Ta, Ming Dong, Shangguan Mu'er, Chongyang Mingyue, and everyone else he was familiar with, leading the experts of the Tian Yuan clan to war against the immortals' world. He had already become a peak expert of the saints' world now. It's the people from the sword sect of Violet Heavens. Jian Chen, let's kill them together. Tai Ta's voice rang out from beside Jian Chen. The sword sect of Violet Heavens. Jian Chen became dazed and lost. He had obtained the twin swords, so logically speaking, he belonged to the sword sect of Violet Heavens. He belonged to the immortals' world, yet at this moment, he was assisting the saints' world in dealing with them. Retreat! Jian Chen waved his hand. He did not come into conflict with the people of the sword sect of Violet Heavens. Jian Chen, what are you doing? Tai Ta bellowed furiously. Jian Chen was a figure of deterrence on the battlefield. Once he retreated, danger would immediately befall the God clan. They would be completely surrounded by the experts of the sword sect of Violet Heavens. Kill the war god of the God clan. Several experts struck out at the same time from the side of the sword sect of Violet Heavens in an attempt to kill Tai Ta. Within the illusion, Tai Ta was not as powerful as Jian Chen had imagined him to be. As a result, he immediately became heavily injured and endangered when he was surrounded by several experts from the sword sect of Violet Heavens. Moreover, even Ming Dong, Shangguan Mu'er, Chongyang Mingyue, and so on faced danger. Jian Chen finally took action at that critical moment, repelling all the experts of the sword sect of Violet Heavens. Jian Chen, hurry up and kill the experts of the sword sect of Violet Heavens. Kill the people of the immortals' world. Once they die, the immortals' world will suffer great losses, and they'll no longer be our saints' world's opponent. Ming Dong and everyone else's voices rang out nearby. However, Jian Chen hesitated. He faced a painful dilemma. They have already been heavily injured. They're basically incapacitated. They can't even escape. Disciples of the sword sect of Violet Heavens, fall into formation and kill all enemies. Elders, use the secret technique with me to suppress Jian Chen. An old man from the sword sect of Violet Heavens called out at this moment. Immediately, he and the other experts sacrificed their vitality in exchange for strength greater than they previously possessed, unleashing a supreme sword formation at Jian Chen. A painful struggle flashed through Jian Chen's eyes as he looked at the experts who killed their way over. He looked back at his heavily injured friends and family. He still ended up taking action. He stopped the sword formation and managed to stop all the experts from the sword sect of Violet Heavens and the immortals' world alone. However, he did not harm any of them. Seeing how they were unable to do anything to Jian Chen, the experts of the sword sect of Violet Heavens all made up their minds. They used an ancient forbidden technique, burning their own life force to kill Jian Chen and the experts of the saints' world under Jian Chen's protection, even if it would cost them their lives. Jian Chen, why do you constantly hold back? They're from the immortals' world. They are our enemies. Hurry up and kill them all. Someone close to Jian Chen urged him loudly. Brother, kill them quickly. Take revenge for your sister. Your sister almost died to their hands, said the silver-haired Chongyang Mingyue. She had been heavily injured by the experts of the sword sect of Violet Heavens. She was basically at death's doorstep. Jian Chen hovered in outer space as his body shook violently. He endured the painful torment in his heart. On one side stood his close friends and family, while the other side was the sword sect of Violet Heavens that he was bound to by countless strands of fate. Now that they had turned on each other, what should he have done? What choices should he have made? In particular, when he saw that the experts of the sword sect of Violet Heavens who were about to offer up their lives, he felt pain. Although I stand in the saints' world, I still belong to the immortals' world in the end. I'm a disciple of the sword sect of Violet Heavens. Do the experts of the sword sect of Violet Heavens have to die for me? Jian Chen seemed saddened as his emotions wavered drastically. He had no idea what to do as he faced a situation like this. Let's go. In the end, Jian Chen still could not bear to watch the experts of the sword sect of Violet Heavens die for him. Before they had wasted away their lives, he waved his hand and moved away with his people. He chose to flee. Jian Chen, why won't you kill the people of the immortals' world? Why won't you kill the people of the sword sect of Violet Heavens? Jian Chen, we need an explanation. You're always showing mercy towards the opponent. Do you belong to the immortals' world? Afterwards, Jian Chen faced the doubts of everyone. Many people even became suspicious of his identity, and many people he was close with could not help but back away. Jian Chen fell silent as he faced the doubtful and cautious gazes in the surroundings. Suddenly, Jian Chen felt alone. He had become isolated. At this moment, the landscape around him suddenly shattered. Everyone vanished, and he was brought to another foreign battlefield in outer space. On the battlefield, he was still a peak expert. However, he currently worked with a sovereign of the immortals' world against an expert of the saints' world bathed in golden light. 4 swords hovered above the head of the sovereign from the immortals' world. He controlled the 4 swords, cutting through space like he was invincible. The sovereign of the immortals' world was blurry. Jian Chen was unable to see him. However, Jian Chen recognized the 4 swords under his control with a single glance. They were the sword of mortality, the sword of reincarnation, the sword of slaughter, and the sword of severance. On the other side, the expert bathed in golden light was the war god of the god clan, Tai Ta. He was currently working with a Nirvanic immortal Exalt, engaged in a battle to the death against Tai Ta in the depths of outer space. Tai Ta was extremely powerful. He needed to work with the Nirvanic immortal Exalt to fend him off. In the end, he and the Nirvanic immortal Exalt paid quite a hefty price to knock back Tai Ta, heavily injured him. The Nirvanic immortal Exalt immediately sent the 4 swords over, creating a sword formation to kill Tai Ta in one fell swoop. However, at this moment, Jian Chen's mind shuddered. He thought of all the times he had spent with Tai Ta in the past. Suddenly, he struck out, not towards Tai Ta, but the Nirvanic immortal Exalt's 4 swords. He wanted to stop them from killing Tai Ta. "What are you doing?" barked the Nirvanic immortal Exalt. "I won't let Tai Ta die here," said Jian Chen. "He's from the saints' world. He must die," the Nirvanic immortal Exalt called out and continued to try to kill Tai Ta. Jian Chen did not back off. He stopped the Nirvanic immortal Exalt from killing Tai Ta. In the end, a battle erupted between him and the Nirvanic immortal Exalt. At this moment, golden light silently appeared. The heavily injured Tai Ta had taken advantage of the battle to swing his axe towards Jian Chen. Jian Chen stared straight at the axe that traveled towards him as disbelief filled his eyes. In the end, the axe landed on him with devastating power under his gaze. Immediately, he experienced piercing pain from the bottom of his heart. The pain made Jian Chen's mind shake, and in the next moment, he felt the world spin around him. Tai Ta vanished and so did the Nirvanic immortal Exalt. Even the outer space around him collapsed. His consciousness had returned to his body. He had returned to the white, hazy world of the Path of Swords. There were no longer steps condensed from sword chi before him. Unknowingly, he had reached the end of the Path of Swords. However, Jian Chen was unable to lighten up at all. Instead, he sat down where he was and sank into his thoughts. His heart was heavy. It varied from person to person. He knew that everything he experienced in the illusion was the worries hidden in the depths of his heart. It had been drawn out by a mysterious power when he took the mental test. At the same time, it had sent his subconsciousness into an illusionary world created by his own mind, presenting his greatest worries in the most realistic manner. In simpler words, everything that happened in the illusion were burdensome thoughts Jian Chen had once experienced. Perhaps these thoughts had only flashed through his head before being forgotten very soon, but they had been endlessly magnified in the illusion, forming an illusion that was almost real and could affect his mind. The appearance of these illusions did indeed have a great effect on Jian Chen. It forced him to re-evaluate his identity as well as his position. He really was very worried that everything he saw in the illusion would happen to him one day. During all these years, you're the third person to complete the Path of Swords. At this moment, an old voice rang out. In the next moment, the landscape around Jian Chen changed. He had already left the Path of Swords, appearing on a mountain that reached into the clouds. Before him sat an old man in white clothes with his back facing him. Junior Jian Chen greets Senior Sword Saint. Jian Chen immediately bowed with a clasped fist. The Celestial Sword Saint sat there as still as a mediating monk. After a moment of thought, he said slowly, "The two people who completed the Path of Swords before were not suited to be my disciple. You are no exception either. You are unsuitable." You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.